Members of Council, if you can please take your seats. This meeting is now resumed. If I can ask Council to please stand for a moment of silence. And during this time, please remember William Gleed. Thank you. Members, we have a presentation this morning to recognize City Manager Peter Wallace. I would like to call upon Mayor Tory to come forward for the presentation.
Well, Madam Speaker and colleagues, and Peter Wallace in particular, good morning. And, I hope you don't hope that you'd ever be standing here talking about the departure of one of our most senior people, whether it be because of retirement or in this case to take on a very distinguished position. And I should note that I think it is evidence in and of itself of the distinction and the high regard in which Peter Wallace is held, that he would be offered the position as the Secretary of the Treasury Board. And I think for those of you who know as much as I, having spent some time as some others here may have in Ottawa and with that government, find it sometimes even more perplexing than this one. It is a position of significant responsibility, probably the most significant public finance job in the country without question, and something that obviously it's a very high honor to be offered that job in the Government of Canada. But you still hope that you're not standing here, even with an opportunity like that, having to say goodbye to somebody. In looking at Peter Wallace and his time here, I could sort of go through the recitation of the list of different acknowledgements and recognitions the city government has received as a top employer for diversity, and I think those things have been and are fundamentally important, not just to the public in terms of their regard for the type of government we run here, but I think for us, because I think we have a set of values that I think are very important to us collectively. For all the debates we have in here, I think we want to run a government that is respectful inside, also in a way that the public can see that in terms of how we treat each other and how the team treats each other and so forth. And I think Peter has been a leader who has, after a period of some instability here, has helped in the process of stabilizing this place and getting us back to, yes, very vigorous debates about things and different points of view, but at the same time sort of moving forward and getting some things done without undue distraction. And I think that does apply, and I don't want any of my comments to be taken this morning as being sort of partisan in the context of the debates that we had as recently as yesterday on some of these matters, but if you look at the very challenging process of putting together our budgets each year. It's challenging, and I sort of found it interesting as I have learned about it I say this often to people in the other governments that I'm dealing with. Imagine the challenge of having to produce each year by law a balanced budget. It forces decisions to be made that sometimes don't have to be made elsewhere, and sometimes people will agree or disagree with how we make or what we make by way of those decisions. But Peter, very much with the help of his team, oversaw that process and helped us to get through it each year, and to get through it in a way that I believe was responsible vis-a-vis how we treated the people who pay the bills, but also was responsible in terms of investing in the city. And I'll come back to the sort of financial framework in a moment. I think less seen by many people, even including many of us, was the role that he played on an intergovernmental basis. The work that has to be done on some of the major transit projects, on different things that have to do with how the other governments are now helping us to finance things here, is painstaking work. It's incredibly detailed work. It's difficult work because, of course, the other governments aren't always wanting to do things in exactly the way that we would, and I'm sure they feel the same way. But Peter worked hard on that and was an invaluable asset to us, particularly as regards his insights into the operation of the provincial government. I think that, again, this is what I said I was alluding to the debate of yesterday. I think that, notwithstanding, I know from yesterday there are people who are, dissatisfied with where we are at this point in time with regard to addressing some of our longer-term financial issues. I will say this. Peter, again, with the support of his team, has, I think, surfaced honestly some of the challenges that this government faces in terms of its go-forward ability to do the things we know we have to do. And in that regard, I think that has been a very useful service for us. I happen to believe that is going to lead to the kind of honest discussion, and really the debate yesterday was about timing of that discussion. It's going to lead to the kind of discussion we know we have to have. And I think even under his leadership, we tried very hard to have it in part through the discussion on road tolls, and that didn't work out. We had a remarkable consensus in this room, and I was proud of that, of all of us, in coming to that consensus, and it didn't work out. So I think we're going to have to go through the same exercise again in order to decide how we can build the city that we want going forward. So Peter, I think in that regard, and one more that I'll mention before I get to the most important aspect of his leadership, which is the one that I want to mention before that, is just to say that I think we have begun under his leadership the process of modernizing the city. I am not satisfied with the pace at which we're doing it. That's not his fault. It is the fault of a sort of an established status quo where the wheels often grind slowly. This is true in business and other large organizations as well. But Peter, the thing I want to say to you that was most important to me, and I hope to my colleagues, I'm sure it was, and that I hope we all feel the same way about this, which was that you also did your job absolutely without exception with integrity and with decency. And when there were things, as will come up in big organizations, especially big public organizations, that called into question how people had behaved or some, what series of events unfolded, you always opted right away. I can tell you this from my private meetings, which were many with Peter, obviously, on the different affairs of the city, to say, let's attack it head on, let's deal with it, let's get the facts on the table, and let's, have consequences flow wherever they may flow. From those kinds of things. And, you need not listen, you need not take my word for that. I think when events transpired elsewhere, I was also proud of the fact that even though it related to a time in his previous life, when our city manager, they said the things they did about him, which didn't surprise me a bit, and I don't think they surprised you either, when they said in proceedings elsewhere that this was a man who had conducted himself throughout with decency and integrity and tried to do the right thing and counsel others to do the right thing. And I can only say in all of my dealings with Peter Wallace, and we've met all the time on the different things that confront us, he was always counseling, that we should try to make sure we stay on course to do the right thing. And to me, I think when people look at government, they don't expect perfection. They don't expect answers to problems that sometimes don't have easy answers. They do expect you to try your best. They expect you to maintain your sense of integrity and decency vis-a-vis how you handle problems that come your way, including the most thorny of problems. And Peter, I can only say your leadership always evidenced that as the first and foremost a consideration in your mind. And so in conclusion, I want to just say that the time here was too short. But events, as Mr. Trudeau Sr. Said, the universe unfolds as it should, and I'm sure he was quoting somebody else in saying that, and that we thank you for your service to the City of Toronto, a long career of distinguished public service, and it's going to carry on with service to the people of Canada. And I'm happy at the fact, if I have to be happy about something in all this, that we have a friend at court, as they would say, in Ottawa, and that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do everything for us, but darn near, I hope. And we wish you well, and we thank you for your public service to the people of Toronto, especially the fact that I think you have conducted yourself with such a great sense of integrity. Integrity in the sense of confronting problems, but also just the way you dealt with issues on a day-to-day basis. And to me, that's the highest compliment that I could pay to anyone on behalf of my colleagues. Thank you very much. And just like we said to Mr. Livy yesterday, this is it. I mean, I can't even tell you it's a gold frame. It's some kind of fake gold frame, but having said that, it's a nice-looking frame. And I won't read you the scroll except to say that I think it really summarizes much of what I've just said the last few minutes in terms of the contribution you've made to stable, sound, decent leadership with integrity here at the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Over to you, sir. Oh, we have to do that first, of course. I'll put that
very specific ritual. All right. Good news is my voice still hasn't come back, so it won't be long. I do want to start off with a fundamental appreciation to the mayor and to the mayor's staff. We've enjoyed, I think, a fantastic working relationship, productive and professional. It's a joy, Mayor, to work with you on a daily basis, and I think we've accomplished a great deal. I also want to thank Council for extending their trust in me. I am an outsider to this organization, or at least came in as an outsider to this organization. Council has been generous in their capacity to work with me and generous in their extending of their trust. Toronto is, I think, really, really, really important. We are a city that's having a moment. We are a globally attractive place. We are receiving a tremendous amount of immigration. We're receiving a tremendous amount of investment. More than half of the people we serve collectively were not born in Canada. The diversity of our economy, the diversity of our people is world-class, and it literally sets the world benchmark. We are, I think, the world's very best bet in living together and prospering together. And I don't think we should ever lose sight of how important we are. And I don't think we should lose sight about how important the City of Toronto is in that. Our economy, our quality of life, the integration of newcomers, the experience of people is fundamentally altered by public investment. And of the public investments made by Canada, by Ontario, but by Toronto, it is those investments made by Toronto that have the most and most obvious and direct impact. I'm saying it in a long and oblique way, but I really want to say it very directly. What we do in this chamber matters. It matters absolutely to people's lives. It matters absolutely to how much money they have left at the end of the day. How we do our work, whether it's efficient or not, what we do our work, whether or not we meet adequate services, is something fundamental and really does have an impact on the almost 3 million people we are privileged to serve. And Council has, I think in its wisdom, actually taken this. And when Council and its members take things seriously, when you actually step up, as you usually do, and take things seriously, and make decisions, you make great decisions. And you instruct staff to actually do stuff. And you instruct staff to save money. You instruct staff to increase services. We do actually do both of those. It's absolutely critical. And the debate should not be affordability versus services. It should be how we accomplish both. How we accomplish both of those. There needs to be a combination of efficiency and effectiveness and impact in every single decision. I think Council has endorsed a package of programs that is making a big difference, that makes a real difference in the quality of life of our citizens. I think it's incredibly important, and I've been greatly privileged to work with all of you in implementing that package. I do want to spend a moment on the team. And working with John Livy, Deputy City Manager Rossini, Deputy City Manager Carboni, Deputy City Manager Scioli, Acting CFO Joe Farag, City Solicitor Wendy Wahlberg, and Uli Watkus. And just, we've got to be clear, Uli's a dotted line, not actually just part of the team. She's a dotted line. We have to make sure that we maintain the separateness of clerks, as we always do, but has just been fantastic. I mean, this is just a great, great, great bench, and our ability to work together and accomplish stuff is, I think, unparalleled. And it's just been a fantastic experience to work with the deputy city managers and other teams. City accomplishes a great deal of what it does through its agencies. And to work with the Toronto Police Services, the Toronto Transit Commission, and Toronto Community Housing has been fantastic. And these are organizations, each of which struggles with its own challenges, its own priorities, and its own governance. But they have all worked with me in the very best of faith. They've all taken the instructions to do more with less very seriously, and they've all done their very best. And I want to extend my appreciation to those organizations and their leaders for their efforts over the last number of years. I do want to, and there are too many to talk about, but one of the great joys of public sector leadership is the actual opportunity to be inspired by others. And when I look around and I see that Deputy City Manager cadre, but the General Manager cadre and the directors, I realize that there are individuals who answer your questions on a weekly basis who I find fundamentally inspiring. They are the very, very best at what they do. They are fully deserving our respect and our support. I really do think that the General Manager cadre in this organization is just fantastic and provides the very highest degree of public service and the very highest degree of ethics. I'm proud of what we've done together. I'm proud of the opportunity I've served with the city. I'm proud of the fact that City Council has entrusted me to be a leader. I'm proud of what we've accomplished together. I do want to also say one other thing about the environment and culture of the City of Toronto. And it will be no secret that one of the things that most attracted me to this role was the opportunity to serve in the fishbowl. And it's not because I enjoy the fishbowl. I genuinely do not. But I do believe that that light, sunlight, and transparency and openness is simply fantastic. And the fact that this community, this political and this policy and this implementation community in this chamber is so open, is so transparent, is so closely monitored, is, I think, an incredible benefit. And one of the most fantastic things, I think, is the community of people out there who watch us, who take us seriously, who take our work seriously, who analyze exactly what we do, who take the time, energy, and effort to make their opinions, their analysis, their crunching of our numbers, their relook at what we do, and make that available. And I want to thank all of those people, along with the gallery, for their efforts. I also want to thank our accountability officers. I think they do a fundamentally great job. I think they are fundamentally important to what they do. I think in a place like Toronto, where we have imperfect history, where we have all sorts of hard-to-follow crannies, the role of the broader public and the role of the Accountability Office should not be underestimated, and I very much enjoy working with both of those groups. Last thing I'd like to say is that I am leaving, and I am leaving with Juliana in charge. And one of the things that I know will happen is that you will extend to Juliana the same support and respect that you have extended to me. I know absolutely that will happen on the staff side, and I know councillors, you will benefit from her wise, sophisticated, and steady leadership. Thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you. Members of Council, we will now review and confirm the order paper. There are 25 items left on the agenda, plus 29 member motions. City Council decided to consider the following items as first and second items of business today. Item PW 27.1, Reimagining Yonge Shepherd to Finch Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Study. And item PG 27.5 on townhouse and low-rise apartment guidelines. City Council will consider member motions at 2 p.m. Item PG 27.2 on Consumers Next, Planning for People and Business at Shepherd and Victoria Park. Final report will be the first item after members' motions. I will now take the release of member holds. Please put your name under request to question staff. Councillor Holiday.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. Allow me a moment here to find the page. Page 4, item number PG 27.7, Ontario Municipal Board Appeal of Official Plan Amendment 231, Request for Directions. I have ensured there's an advanced circulation of an amending motion, and I'd just like to put that through right now.
Okay, that's on page 4, PG 27.7. It's on the screen. All in favor?
Hold it for a second, I haven't seen it, I'm sorry.
It was circulated yesterday.
No, I'm looking for it right now.
Did we want to hold it down?
You don't need to hold it, right?
No,
Okay, let's hold it down.
it's not very controversial.
Councillor Shan.
We have to move the machinery of government forward.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On page 3, I would like to release CA 20.2, appointment of public members to the Toronto Public Library Board.
Okay, on page 3, CA 20.2. It's been released. All in favor?
My colleague is leaving.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Councillor Shiner.
Councillor Pasternak was just trying to leave the floor.
Oh,
as he
okay,
did.
sorry. Yes, recorded vote.
Mayor Tory, please. Councillor Mamalidi, Councillor Palacio, Councillor Holland.
Councillor Matlow, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 31 in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam. Oh, sorry. Councillor Shan?
Yeah, on page 5, TE 30.91, use of Nathan Phillips Square for various events from March 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2018. I would like to release that as well.
Okay, on page 5, T 30.91. All in favor? Recorded.
Mayor Tory, please. Councillor Mamalidi, Councillor Holland, and Councillor Frakadakis, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 32 in favor.
Councillor Wong Tam. Oh, sorry, Councillor Shan, you have another one?
Yeah, this is my last one. I would like to release PG 27.4, approval of 2018 Toronto Heritage Grant Awards as well. Page 4, sorry.
Okay, on page 4, PG 27.4, Councillor Shan is releasing. Recorded.
Councillor Pasternak, please. Councillor Pasternak.
The item is adopted unanimously, 32 in favor.
Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, good morning, Madam Speaker. The item is on page 5, TE 30.93, endorsement of events for liquor licensing purposes. I do have a quick motion that can be placed on the screen by clerks. We're simply adding 2 more establishments, Maison Mercer and the Everlay, to this list for Canadian Music Week. Thank you.
Thank you. So on page 5, T 30.93, the amendments on the screen. Did somebody say recorded? Recorded.
Councillor Grimes, please.
The amendment is adopted unanimously, 32 in favor.
Item is amended. Recorded.
Councillor DeGiorgio, please.
Councillor Campbell, please. Councillor Campbell, can we have your vote, please? Thank you.
The item as amended is adopted unanimously, 32 in favor.
Councillor Shiner.
Yes, Madam Speaker, on page 10, MM 38.23, which clerks had asked that we move forward to. It's the request for a deadline extension of Toronto Local Appeal Body Rules of Practice and Procedure. My colleague, Councillor Perks, I think has had a chance to read it.
No. So, I'd like to
Councillor Davis says she has an issue.
Oh, well, no problem. Just if you were that way, just please always just give me a heads up, and I'm only too glad to keep holding it.
Thank you. Councillor Fillion. Councillor Fillion.
Thank you. Heads up to Councillor Wong Tam. This is the Mount Pleasant Cemetery issue. It's an amendment to the recommendations.
Which
it's
page?
been written for me by staff and
what
okayed by
item?
the chair.
Page 3.
Sorry, page 3.
GM 25.
GM 25.6.
After I told you what page it was on.
That is it up on the screen? Yeah. That City Council amend the offer to donate between the City and Mount Pleasant Group of Cemeteries in respect of the lands notice parts 1, 2, and 3 on Plan 66R 29405, attached as Appendix A to the report from the Director of Real Estate Services to the earlier of March 30th, 2019, or 30 days following the dismissal of the settlement of the legal proceedings between the Friends of Toronto Public Cemeteries Incorporated and Kristen Wong Tam and Her Majesty, the Queen and Right of Ontario, the Public Guardian, the Trustee, and Mount Pleasant Group of Cemeteries. What this simply does is, the background to this is that the cemetery donated land to the city. That's been held up because there is a legal matter between a group of people and the cemetery. So what this does is it just extends the offer from the cemetery to the city for another year, at which time the matter should be settled.
Thank you. So on the amendment, recorded.
Councillor Mamalidi, please. Councillor Fletcher, please. And Councillor Cole, please.
Councillor Davis and Councillor Matlow.
The amendment carries. The vote is 29-2.
Item as amended. On favor, carried. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Page 4, PG 27.6, request for direction, Ontario Municipal Board Appeals, Official Plan Amendment 231, and Ice Arena permissions. I had a chance to talk to Mr. Lintern, and my question was answered. Not too sure I'm satisfied, but I'll let it go.
On page 4, PG 27.6, Councillor Grimes is releasing. On favor, recorded vote.
Councillor Wong Tam, Councillor McMahon.
Mayor Tory, Councillor Mamalidi, please.
Councillor Hart, please.
The item is adopted. The vote is 33 to 1.
All those in favor of adopting the order paper? Carried. We will now go to page 4, PW 27.1, Reimagining Young Shepherd to Finch. Questions? Okay, if we can clear the board, please. Questions to staff? Put your name up, request to question staff. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, just one sec. Sorry, Councillor Cole. Councillor Shiner, you held the item down. Do you want to ask questions first? No? Okay. Councillor Cole, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just looking at some of the attachments that list or show the evaluation criteria, the impacts on walking, curbside parking, etc. And I'm looking for transit as being one of the criteria that's measured, and I don't see it there. Am I missing something?
Hold on. I'll put your time on hold.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Speaker, there was certainly engagement with the TTC around transit. I think part of the challenge with either alternative has been connection to the Finch station, the LRT station, subway station, and the alternative includes fifth lane north of Finch to accommodate trips in that direction. We've had conversations with the TTC about their interest in having 6 lanes north of Finch so that they have both the north and southbound access. But transit certainly is an issue. We've talked about access certainly for subway patrons, but for surface transit, we've done some assessment of the number of transit vehicles that run on the surface and how to best accommodate.
So I guess my question is as options are put in front of us as council members make the decision, and we've got a set of criteria and some measurements attached to that criteria, I don't see surface transit being one of those to compare options 1 and 2.
Through you, Speaker, the assessment of transit was partially considered as part of the traffic assessment in terms of surface transit. Travel along the corridor, as well as opportunities to consolidate stops and provide stops in laybys for both the GO transit vehicles that use this corridor as well as the TTC surface transit.
So that would be that mobility congestion management evaluation metric?
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay. And under that metric, what is the impact on, say, bus travel times or service reliability or gapping and bunching of buses? I guess that could go to city staff or TTC. Yeah. If you could hold my time, Madam Speaker.
Yes, I will.
Jackie Darwood.
Through you, Madam Speaker. We have not been able to determine that yet, but we did some hypothetical calculations to say if there was a 30-second delay on transit vehicles, what would be the impact? And what that is showing us that if we had a 30-second delay, or approximately 38,000 customers who use that corridor during peak would have a combined delay of about almost 5,000 minutes. So that's going to impact the service in terms of we're going to end up with more variability, and we're going to end up with unreliable service, a lot of gapping and bunching in the service.
So, but you initially said that the modeling or work has not yet been done on impacts on travel time and surface transit?
The modeling work has been done, is my understanding. Unfortunately, us at TTC, we were not able to assess that. And because of that, what we did was the hypothetical situation. We are working with our partners.
Sorry, just a sec. Please, there's an awful lot of noise. Councillor Fletcher, please. Councillor Pasternak, please. Okay, continue. Continue.
We are working with our partners at Transportation Services to be able to have full access to the modeling that the consultants did, and at that time we'll be able to provide more details as to the exact impact.
So at this point, when we're making a decision right now, and it looks like there are options in front of us, we don't know the full impact on travel times or service reliability for surface transit?
Through the Speaker, we do have information about the impact on travel time through the corridor, not specifically for surface transit, but as an element of overall travel. Transform Yonge in a 2031 scenario would be a 2-minute increase in travel time, and the Enhance Yonge Transform Beecroft option would be a 1.5-minute increase in travel time.
And sorry, how many, so 1.5 to 2 minutes increase in travel time, and for how many passengers, transit passengers, was that impact
Approximately
daily?
38,000 during the rush hour.
And how about over the course of the entire day?
And this is just for the passengers that are using Finch Station, not going down to Shepherd.
And so how many total in the day then? If it's 38,000 in peak?
During the peak, if across the day, it would be approximately 75,000 passengers.
So 75,000 passengers daily are affected by somewhere between a 1 and 2 minute increase in travel times?
I don't think it's going to be as much as 2 minutes because, as I said, most of them are going into Finch Station. So that's why we need to do that detail work. Because the delay that my colleague from Transportation Services is talking about, I figure is for the entire section.
Sure, I'm just running out of time. How would that compare to King Street, where we've made significant changes to get a 1 or 2 minutes increase in streetcar travel times for around, I think it's around 80,000 people or customers a day?
Okay, that was your last question.
It's 84,000 people on King Street that we have made the changes to facilitate an improvement, and in the evening peak we are saving approximately 2 minutes of travel time.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruptions. Councillor Carmichael Greb.
Thank you. One of the big pressure points in this area is the Yonge 401 interchange. And there's been talk for several years about rebuilding that to make it more efficient and cause less congestion. When is that expected to be completed?
Through the Speaker, the Ministry of Transportation is leading that study, and they've initiated work this year. I anticipate that would probably take about 18 months to complete, and then it would go into a full environmental assessment following that.
So we're looking at, what, 5+ years?
It's not something that I believe is in the province's capital plan, so it certainly would be in the post-5-year scenario. I'd like to clarify, though, that both options that have been presented here involve 6 lanes between Shepherd and the 401 in order to facilitate capacity to the 401.
In the Eglinton Connects study between Avenue and Mount Pleasant, where they're removing a lane of traffic in each direction, so you'll have 1 lane in either direction and then a middle turning lane. There's a small bullet point hidden in the report that says over 10% of traffic will be driven into the local neighborhoods. How much of the traffic, if option 1 is taken, will be driven into the local neighborhoods?
Through the Speaker, the modeling that's been done indicates that traffic generally coming from York Region would choose other routes outside of this study area, so they would generally choose Bayview or Bathurst as alternates beyond the traffic that would be carried by Yonge Street, Doris, or Beecroft within the North York Centre.
What's the current capacity left on those roads?
Over the 3 roads that we're talking about, we have 14 lanes. There's 4 lanes on Beecroft, 4 lanes on Doris, and 6 lanes on Yonge Street. Yonge Street carries approximately 55,000 a day, and Doris and Beecroft are in the range of I believe, 20,000 each. Sorry, about 15 to 20,000.
I mean Bayview and Bathurst.
I don't have the numbers in front of me for that. I can ask staff if they can pull that up.
And what about going northbound? Because I drive this route going northbound in rush hour, and it's a disaster in the morning. So there are people that still drive north, not just coming from York Region.
Absolutely.
So what about those people that will be driven into local neighborhoods?
Through the Speaker, to your question about Bayview, Bayview carries approximately 20,000 vehicles a day, and Bathurst carries approximately the same. Is that in which direction?
And what's their from a capacity standpoint, what are they at?
I don't have the information about capacity on Bayview or Bathurst. I'll ask staff to pull that up. It's beyond the realm of the study area. But I would say that the majority of traffic coming through this corridor is coming to and from York Region. So 74% of traffic on Yonge Street originates from York Region.
And that's going southbound in the morning, correct?
Yes, and in the afternoon, about 73% of traffic on Yonge Street is destined to York Region.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll begin my questions, and I suppose this is probably to the Chief Planner. How many residents live within walking distance of this stretch of Yonge Street?
Through the chair, I think you could assume that population of the North York Centre generally as a walking distance population, approximately 56,000 people.
56,000 people?
In 2016, yes.
In 2016. Are we anticipating future growth in this area?
Yes, the plan anticipates growth up to between 80, from 80 to 100,000 on the 2041 planning horizon, making it outside of the downtown the fastest growing urban growth center of the 4 urban growth centers that the city has.
So we're expecting by 2041, so in 25 years, there will be from 80 to 100,000 people, nearly a doubling in the population within the walking distance of this area. Is that correct?
That's correct. The variability there depends on factors such as building out transit improvements and other improvements in the area.
Okay. I'll direct this to our General Manager of Transportation Services. What's the number of people commuting by car through this corridor?
Through you, Madam Speaker, approximately 45% of the mode share in the area is commuting by car. As Jacqueline mentioned earlier, the bulk of that, about 3/4 of it, originates in York Region.
So 3/4 of the vehicle commuters originate in York Region outside of the City of Toronto?
About 74%.
74%. Okay. 74% of the cars coming through here originate in the York Region. Has there been a change in mode shift and car patterns in the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in this area?
There has been. Since 1995, we've seen about a 21% decrease in auto mode share in this corridor. We've seen also an increase by about 18% in transit and an increase, about a doubling of pedestrian volume as well, up to about 6%.
I'm sorry, Councillor Mihevc was speaking in my ear there. I couldn't hear. Could you repeat? I missed the first number. Yep. Could you give me the mode shift again? Sorry.
Sure. For vehicles, about 21% decrease. The years that we have are from 2010 to 1995. And then in transit, about an 18% increase in transit over that same time frame. Yeah. And an increase also to about 6% of walking mode share. So about a doubling in that time of walk mode share.
And just to be clear, that 21% decrease in cars using this corridor, that was up until 2010, you said? So do we assume or do you speculate that that has continued, that downward trend in the number of cars driving through this stretch?
Recent National Housing Survey data that brings us up to 2016 does indicate that the trend is continuing in that direction.
Okay, so in the last 25 years, the number of people driving through this corridor has gone down while the number of people taking public transit and walking through this corridor has gone up.
Correct.
And there's a recommendation, one of the recommendations is to maintain the cars, which would buck the trend. Is that correct?
If you're referring to the enhanced Yonge option?
Yes.
The enhanced Yonge option would retain the same number of lanes on Yonge Street.
Okay. And one of the objectives of the study, as I understand it, is to look at an improved streetscape and public realm, correct, building on the tremendous growth in population.
Correct.
Of the options in front of us, which does the most and which is your recommendation for improved enhancements to the public realm and the streetscape?
So yes, the public realm and streetscape enhancements are a critical piece and the impetus for this study. The Transform Yonge alternative typically provides about 2.45 meters of additional public realm space over both sides of the street, and then Enhance is about just a little under a meter of additional. So certainly there's more public realm capacity in the Transform Yonge alternative.
Okay, and just my last question, and I'll go back to the chief planner, if that's okay. You mentioned when I began questions to you that this area was the second highest growth area outside of the downtown, or second after the downtown?
It's second, through the chair, it's second after the downtown, looking at Etobicoke, Scarborough, North York, and Yonge and Eglinton as our 4 urban growth centers.
Yeah.
Outside of the downtown, it's the fastest growing and the most intense urban growth center in the city.
Outside of the downtown, okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to our transportation staff. When we looked at the bluer bike lanes, staff came forward with cycling statistics to show how that mode would increase with changes to the road. I gather we also did that with Harvard Street when those decisions were made. Is that correct? And other decisions were made by council?
Through you, Madam Speaker, yes, we did an analysis on the Bloor Street bike lanes of parallel corridors in the network, including Harvard Street.
This report, correct me if I'm wrong, is fairly silent on cycling usage and is devoid of numbers. Is it not? Or am I wrong?
We did do analysis on cycling numbers, and do you have? We're getting those right now, Councillor.
Well, are they in the report?
Through the Speaker, no. The numbers on existing cycling volumes are not in the report. Part of the objectives of this study, and whether that be in the Transform Yonge option or in the Enhance Yonge option, are about providing cycling network connectivity. So whether that's on Yonge Street or whether Council provides direction that that's on Beecroft, it's about providing a safe network.
I get that, but what I mean is it safe to say that the analysis and the understanding of how cycling will be impacted is incomplete, given the report that's in front of us?
I can say, Councillor, through the Speaker, that on Doris and Beecroft, you have about 100 cyclists two-way in an 8-hour period, and on Yonge Street, the peak hour is about 25 cyclists a day, and the 8 hours about 50. So they are very low volumes for an urban center, and it's about providing cycling connectivity for a safe cycling network in that area.
I would just add that part of the issue is, as Jacqueline mentioned, the connectivity, so not knowing what the latent demand is for cycling capacity up there because the network doesn't currently connect.
I understand that, and there's a bit of a, if you build it, they will come, and I get that. I understand here. I want to go back to what Councillor Cole was talking about in the TTC. How many buses go into that Finch station on a daily basis?
We have 5 routes that travel along there. 2 of them are 2 of our major routes, the Steels, the 60 Steels and the 53 Steels. We have approximately 1,300 scheduled bus trips that go along there during the day.
So we have 1,300 buses going into the Finch...
bus trips.
Right.
Yes.
That's in and out?
Yes,
in and out.
both ways,
okay.
yes.
All right, that's good. Okay, so in and out, 1,300 trips. And so, and we do not know the impact of in terms of time, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not know the impact in terms of time delays for those buses. Is that correct?
As my colleague from Transportation Services said previously, they did do the study to look at the impact for general traffic along there.
But I'm talking only mass transit. I'm talking only TTC. Is that information incomplete or complete? I think that's my answer.
Through the Speaker, the bus network, they have different routes coming in and out of Finch Station, and so the specific volumes of an impact on buses in this area hasn't been identified specifically for TTC or York Region Transit or GO, but we do know it's about a 30-second difference between the Transform Yonge alternative and the Enhance Yonge alternative in terms of overall traffic impact.
Overall traffic impact, but that's cars. I'm not talking about cars. I'm talking about TTC. Okay.
Without dedicated lanes for transit, though, on the surface, the buses are impacted in the same congestion as the cars, which is why the analysis was done at that level.
Okay. Councillor Carmichael Greb talked about where are the cars going to go, and that would be a concern to me. I know there's Beecroft and there's the other street, but I mean, people coming in from York region will choose either Bathurst or Bayview. Do we know what the capacities are on those two roads in terms of daily vehicular travel? And whether or not, and how much extra capacity there is? Because my concern is, where are all those cars going to go?
So my understanding is that when the ring roads were constructed, they were constructed to encourage the capacity and the growth in that area. They are now currently under capacity. They're not being used at their full capacity. And so Beecroft and Doris, so starting with that, in terms of the 14 lanes that we fully analyzed, and the part of the challenge there is the connectivity between the Yonge corridor, both from the north and the south, accessing those ring roads. And so both alternatives address improvements to those ring roads to address capacity.
Okay, that's my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I wanted to just ask to the TTC the numbers, the buses that are impacted by this, the number of buses at the Finch station. If you could just give me those numbers again.
We have approximately 1,300 trips going in and out of the station.
1,300 trips going in and out of the Finch station?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Connectivity. So if we go with the Beecroft option that was put forward at Public Works, can you just talk me through the connectivity? I understand that there's TTC lands and there's a connection to Willowdale, the bike lanes at Willowdale that are pre-existing. If you could just walk me through that.
Through you, Madam Speaker, for the cycling connections?
That's exactly right.
Got it. So on the Enhance Yonge, Transform Beecroft, the Willowdale piece that you mentioned is actually a capital project that's going to be constructed in 2019 to improve Willowdale with on-street facilities. For the Enhance option on Beecroft, it is a dedicated, separated cycle track facility that runs on Beecroft all the way to the Hydro Corridor Trail with access to the Finch LRT station.
Okay, so there is a nice, it would be, eventually over time, it would be seamless. That would be a seamless route for cyclists. Is that correct?
The proposal that came out of the PWIC for Enhance Yonge, Transform Beecroft includes a fully separated cycle track facility to the Hydro Corridor Trail.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. Also to the GM, my understanding is that I think you shared with me at one point that you're happy with either option that's been presented to Council.
Through you, Councillor, I just wanted to indicate that the proposal that PWIC put forward was a slightly modified alternative of the Enhance Yonge, Transform Beecroft, which looks at Sharrows north of Finch to the Hydro Corridor Trail as a cost-saving measure, because part of the impact of the cost on the Enhanced Yonge, Transform Beecroft is property acquisitions north. As we get further into design, if that's the selection that's made, we believe that there are options that reduce that cost and still allow us to have that connectivity.
Okay, but so yes, and I'm after the connectivity piece. Thank you. You shared with me at an earlier stage, it might have been December, maybe January, that you're happy with either option.
We were asked to come back with a viable alternative to Transform Yonge, and we have done that.
Okay.
We believe that both options meet the criteria that was established, and we believe that Transform meets them given the cost implications and the public realm implications. We believe Transform Yonge is the more viable choice.
Okay, and then we have two options. There's different price tags associated with each. I asked for a breakdown of those costs. I don't think I've ever seen that. There's some numbers on page 4 of the report, but I did ask for it verbally and in writing. I have an email here dated December 11th. Is there any breakdown to show the true costs of those options?
Through the Speaker, yes, the Transform Yonge option would cost just over $51 million, and that would...
No, but I'm asking for, I would like to see a breakdown of how you got to that number, and I've never seen that. So am I missing an appendix, or I've asked for it multiple times?
So detailed construction breakdowns were only recently provided from our consultant, but I can certainly provide that to you, Councillor. The enhanced Yonge and transformed Beecroft option was broken up in the report in the sense of the full cost of that option would be $71 million. The Yonge Street portion of that is $49 million, and the Beecroft portion of that is $22 million. There are a couple
so can
of
I just ask you though? I'm not asking for those numbers. I'm asking for the breakdown. And so you're saying a consultant put those budgets together, not city staff?
Yes, Councillor. The environmental assessment study was prepared by a consultant to support our work on this, and we have detailed construction.
So you now have that information? Because I asked for it December 11th.
We didn't have it at that time, Councillor, but we can certainly show that to you.
Could I get access to that today, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Burnside.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to staff. Obviously, one of the big concerns about whatever we do is the increase in travel time. I see through the report, or in the report, we have a little table here about Transform Yonge and then the Enhance Yonge. One of the things the report mentions is that cars will, on the Transform Yonge, they will use Doris, Beecroft, Bayview, and Bathurst. What are the increase in travel times for cars if they use Bayview?
Through the Speaker, we haven't calculated the increase in travel time on Bayview or Bathurst, but we do know that Bayview and Bathurst are currently operating less than capacity. To the Councillor's question earlier, depending on the spacing of signals and the particular section we're talking about, Bayview and Bathurst have a capacity of between 50 and 65,000 vehicles, but are currently operating in a range of about 40,000 vehicles on the heaviest sections of those streets.
Thanks. But so, when we had the Gardner debate, we had more of a fulsome report where there were different, I mean, you had about 15 minutes away. You had every possible travel route and the impact on travel times. If there's a suggestion that cars are going to be using Bathurst or Bayview, the other two major north-south routes, would it not be helpful for Council to know what those impacts are?
Through the Speaker, when we look at the impact on Yonge Street being about a 30-second difference between the two alternatives in a 2031 projection, the impact on Bathurst and Bayview would be less significant than that. So that's why we haven't detailed that level of impact within this report.
Okay. We have this modeling, I guess there's modeling was done. Putting aside the pilots, because with pilots we can go back and look at the accuracy. Other modeling that's been done in the past, do we go back and actually look at the accuracy? Like, do we do follow-up? I mean, these are projections, right? We have no idea how accurate, and there are unintended consequences.
So through you, Madam Speaker, there would be a number of factors that would change over time. I think we have a much more robust oversight and monitoring on the pilot projects that we do. It's one of the reasons we do them.
Sorry for interrupting, only because I have 2 minutes. I'm not talking about pilot projects.
Yeah.
I'm talking about projects that would be approved, that weren't pilots. Have we gone back and looked at the accuracy of the modeling?
Typically not.
No. Okay, thank you. In the Transform Yonge, which I mentioned before, traffic would be moved on. Some traffic would go on to Doris and Beecroft. When you stated the increased time on, we'll just use Doris. Was that from Finch down to Shepherd?
Yes.
Okay. Understanding that traffic is moving from Yonge over to Doris, presumably wants to come back to Yonge. Do we have the data of what that actual increased time is? Because you're actually pushing traffic east or west, but then you're taking the actual time at those points. Would the measurement not be once it's back on Yonge?
No, that was included in the assessment. It was a network model, so it was included in the assessment of those three corridors. And then the other piece of that, just the capacity to connect back to Yonge Street would be enhanced in either alternative through modifications to the connections.
Okay, and I saw in the report how there's a projection of increased TTC usage. Well, actually, I'm going to forget that question because I've only got a minute left. The King Street pilot, how much time has been saved so far for transit users? It's about 4 minutes. I think that's what you sent me.
Through the Speaker, yes, in the heaviest PM peak travel time, it's a 4 to 5 minute speeding up of travel time.
And so it's 4 minutes. Would you consider that a success? Saving 4 minutes?
Through you, I think the issue, so yes, but I also think it's in a broader context because we're talking about reliability, which is another critical factor for the user's perspective, is that
No, I understand that, but just if we look at the time savings, 4 minutes, would that be considered a success?
In combination with an 85% increase in reliability, yes.
Okay. The distance of the King Street pilot is about twice that of the Shepherd to Finch corridor, correct?
In terms of the kilometers?
The distance, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you doubled up the increased time of 2 minutes, if it's 2 minutes increased time for Transform Yonge delay, that delay would now be 4 minutes. So if one's a success, saving 4 minutes, would the other not be considered a failure?
What was your last question?
It's not comparable, I believe, to double the number based on the kilometers.
Thank you. Councillor de Bearmaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think my questions are to TTC staff. First, in your opinion to this council, with the original proposal, Transform Yonge, and it would reduce the lanes of traffic north and southbound, will that improve transit times or make the transit times worse?
Through the Speaker, it will make transit times worse.
So if one of our goals in the city is to improve public transit, and transit time specifically, the original recommendations would make the situation for transit worse.
Yes, seeing that it will remove the HOV lanes that we have now. As I said previously, we did an hypothetical calculation of a 30 seconds delay. We'll refine that through the modeling.
Okay. And through Madam Speaker, one of the goals I think of the King pilot, and one of I think what we at TTC brag about in terms of the King Street pilot project, is that we've improved reliability of our service. If we reduce lanes on Yonge Street, will we improve reliability on the TTC?
Through the Speaker, we won't.
So in terms of being better or worse, if we reduce the lanes, the reliability of the TTC service will get worse.
The reliability will get worse.
And in terms of improving transit service overall, if we reduce the lanes of traffic on Yonge, will transit service get better or will transit service get worse?
Transit service will definitely get worse because there will be what we call bunching, meaning we have the schedule, but the buses won't be able to maintain the schedule, so you'll have a number of buses coming at one time because it's unreliable. You have that variability. Then you'll have gaps in the system, so customers will be waiting for longer periods.
Okay, and through you, Madam Speaker, and I want to maybe ask you questions about what you just said. Bunching on the King Street project, for the people in the downtown core, we want less bunching, correct?
That's correct.
Bunching is bad.
That's correct.
Bunching is bad. It's fair for me to make that comment. We don't like bunching. Bunching is bad.
That's correct.
And if we reduce the lanes of traffic on Yonge Street, will we increase bunching?
We will increase bunching.
And bunching is bad.
That's correct.
And we will make transit service worse for the people of the City of Toronto.
Our experience and our calculations have shown that where there is bunching, there's longer wait time for customers because we end up with a variable service that's not reliable.
And on the King Street project, would you agree with me that we are attempting to give transit more priority or a better priority over in order to improve service?
That's the intent, and that's what has been the experience.
And if we reduce the lanes of traffic on Yonge Street, are we doing the opposite of what we're doing on King? We're making things worse instead of better?
We would be going in the opposite direction.
And in terms of our goal line, one of our very things I think that we again brag about on King Street, I'm sorry, I'm hoping that staff aren't being coached by other people. I'm asking you questions, not 6 other people. So I just would like your answers.
Okay, hold on. Point of order, Councillor Layton.
It's common for staff on the floor of council to ensure that they're giving the best possible answers to council to discuss with one another. That's quite common. So I would please ask the councillor to refrain from attacking staff.
Not a point of order.
Well, I don't think I was attacking staff, but I'll take the councillor's point, and I'm just, you know, I didn't think she was getting advice. I think she was being badgered, but I'll say no, that's...
Okay, okay, hold on, Councillor.
Point of personal privilege, by the way.
Sorry, let me put your mic on.
Now Councillor de Beremaker has quite purposely commented in a very negative way, saying that one of our senior staff are badgering another senior staff. I believe... No. What he said was that transportation staff were badgering TTC staff.
Okay,
that is what he said. Please don't try to correct me when you're wrong.
Councillor Layton, hold on. Thank you. Councillor de Beremaker. Okay, please. Councillor de Beremaker, can you please retract those comments?
Pardon me?
Can you retract those comments?
Oh, yes, I will. That was certainly not my thought, was my impression, and I certainly don't want to
Can you apologize, please?
Absolutely. I apologize for any...
Okay, continue with your questions.
Yep. Thank you. So in terms of, again, the King Street pilot project, and again, I'm asking TTC staff, we have increased ridership because of the King Street pilot project?
That's correct.
And in your opinion, if we reduce the lanes of traffic on Yonge Street, will we increase ridership on TTC? Or will we decrease ridership on TTC?
If we reduce the number of lanes from, what is proposed in the document is to reduce the number of lanes from 6 to 5.
Yes.
It will have a negative impact because we will have people waiting for longer, and our experience has been where we make travel times longer, we tend to reduce ridership.
So from your perspective, from the TTC perspective, reducing the lanes causes you all sorts of problems on all sorts of levels in terms of providing better service to the public.
That has been our experience.
And as a staff member of the TTC, do you consider the TTC itself and the buses and our bus stops, do you consider the TTC to be part of the public realm?
Our facilities are certainly the stops and the roadways that we use are actually, yes, they're part of the public realm because we are part of what is considered the complete street phenomenon.
Okay, and again, I want to make sure that I understood what you've said to me. So you've said to me transit times will get worse if we reduce the lanes, traffic. If we reduce the lanes, transit times get worse?
That's correct, if it's reduced from 6 to 5.
Yep. Reliability gets worse?
That's correct.
Transit service gets worse?
That's correct.
Bunching gets worse?
That's correct.
And ridership gets hurt?
Ridership would be reduced.
That was your last question? Cute. Councillor Mihevik.
Yes, thank you. I want to pursue TTC a little bit more on this. My understanding is that this plan is actually between Shepherd and just north of Finch. If I'm not mistaken, there's a thing called a subway underneath that section of Yonge Street. So are we talking about, what routes in particular are you talking about? Are you talking about the Yonge North bus that goes into Shepherd? Because that's outside the zone, it seems to me. What routes are you talking about?
No, we're actually talking about 5 routes that come down from, that operates between through you, Madam Speaker, 5 routes that currently operate between Steeles and Finch. Those routes are the 60 Steeles West, the 53 Steeles East, and we have 3 others which I can't recall.
But certainly you are aware that this plan, the Transform Yonge option, is between Shepherd and Finch, not between, except for a couple of blocks north, not between Finch and Steeles.
Through you, Madam Speaker, the area we're talking about, the project area actually runs from just north of Finch to Shepherd. So it does include the area that covers the entrance going into Finch Station, from Hendon Bishop down to Shepherd.
Okay, so it is, so to be very accurate then, it is that little overlap of that 2 blocks between Finch itself and Finch Station. That's what we're talking about. But most of the buses are coming along Yonge Street from the north and therefore not impacting this area.
They are coming from Yonge Street from the north and along Finch. So they are impacted by that section. It's about 210 kilometers of roadway. Meters of roadway that would be affected.
210 meters. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so just to transportation staff and maybe planning staff, in terms of pedestrianization, which is the stronger option, the Beecroft option or in terms of providing, frankly, mobility for pedestrians, which gives a wider sidewalk, strengthens the pedestrian realm?
Through you, the Transform Young option provides a wider sidewalk and a more consistent public realm.
And allows for patios and basically a more vital urbanized landscape?
Correct. There's expansion of the public realm in both options, but there's additional expansion in Transform Young.
Okay. In terms of accidents, there's a big, which of the two options is likely to contribute to our goals around Vision Zero?
So the Transform Young option at 4 lanes shortens the crossing distance east-west across Yonge Street, which provides enhanced safety for pedestrians crossing. Both alternatives reduce the crossing distance on the north-south blocks at, I believe, 18 locations. So there's enhancement if you're walking along north-south in both alternatives.
Which alternative better suits the goals of Vision Zero then at the end of the day?
Transform Young with 4 lanes, again, shortens that crossing distance. We've seen about 19 injuries and fatalities in the study area over the course of the past 7 years. And so we've looked comprehensively at how, and all of those are impacting pedestrians. And so we're really quite focused on wanting to make sure that the pedestrian experience is the most enhanced.
Okay, so the next question is around cycling infrastructure and the cycling network. Understanding that there's been a 2-year process, and I imagine that this was well scoped out, which one provides a stronger cycling infrastructure?
Through you, both alternatives provide dedicated separated cycle tracks, one on the main route, right, one on Yonge Street, and the other that is on Beecroft, which again is a separated facility.
Got it.
And both of them provide a viable alternative for cyclists to get north and south.
My question is, which is a better alternative? Because at the end of the day, we have to press yes or no to one of them.
Right. I think that what you would, in my professional opinion, having a separated all ages and abilities facility is the most important thing. Certainly people would argue that having it on Yonge Street where you have access to shops and transit, etc., is more direct for cyclists. I would also say that on Beecroft, as long as you have a connected separated facility.
Okay, you landed your plane, that's good. And
yeah, Councillor Mihevik, allow her to finish, please.
That connectivity up to the Hydro Corridor Trail is critical, especially in a separated facility.
And that was your last question. Councillor Troisi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do both options improve the bike lanes going north and south?
Through you, yes, they both do.
Okay. And do both options improve the public realm?
Through you, yes, they both do. And as I mentioned, Transform has wider public realm than Enhance.
Great, thank you. Is the medical officer of health here?
Yes. Well, her representative, yes.
Great. Can you explain why the report to public health did not prefer one or the other option?
Certainly, through the Speaker, both of the options point in the right direction as compared to the status quo. So they both move us into a more active environment that provides options for all ages and abilities, in particular by providing the separated bike lanes in both options. And they both support an increased option for pedestrians. The difficulty in choosing between the two for health is that our review is based on literature that's been published and other jurisdictions. That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen here in this setting and in this time period. So it's not possible for us to say this is exactly how it will fold out. But what we did offer was to be involved through the ongoing decision making that will happen as an option's chosen and as the various issues related to creating active design and healthy design are made through a series of implementation processes. And it's in that stage, continuing to create a design that people will use, that we need to make sure we satisfy the original intent of the vision, which is to create a more walkable, active form of transportation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ms. Gray, I wanted to ask about, so in the report on page 10 of 26, there's a colored graph of the traffic in the area, or the study area. And so my understanding from the report is the traffic that flows through this area, the study area, your staff have determined that 74% of that traffic is going to come from outside of Toronto?
Through you, yes, from York Region.
And on this graph, there seems to be some concern, and I've heard it both in the media and from some of my colleagues, that so that traffic that's going to come out of York, when it hits this area, is either going to go down Beecroft or Doris to get back to Shepherd to loop back onto Yonge?
Through you, Madam Speaker, let me just clarify, that 74% is traveling along Yonge Street. The proposal that we are, that is on the table increases and improves access to Doris and Beecroft to make those connections more viable for people who are traveling through the community, with the intent that Yonge Street itself, through the study area, would become much more of a main street and support that kind of connectivity and pedestrian access and vibrancy that we believe was envisioned, and envisioned also as part of the North York Centre Plan.
Okay, and so in that discussion, going back to, I remember Mel Lassman was mayor and he wanted this to be the downtown in North York. So there was, subway station was built. I remember my wife, girlfriend then lived off of that area. So office development, retail, but back then when I was dating my wife, 25, 30 years ago, Yonge Street's never changed. It was built, the infrastructure was put there 50 years ago, and nothing has changed since.
Through you, one of the reasons why this project has come forward now is because the street really is at the end of its useful life and needs to be reconstructed. So yes, it hasn't been, other than patched and managed, it hasn't been reconstructed in that time frame.
So in the middle of all that time frame, along came Mel Lassman. This is what downtown North York is going to be pre-amalgamation, but we didn't really take it to the next step. North York didn't take it to the next step, and the City of Toronto has never taken it to that next step.
So with regard to the road, I would agree with you. I think what has changed dramatically in the North York Centre, though, is the land uses and the population growth. What we have learned is that population growth between 2006 and projected to 2041 is supposed to go up by about 171%. And we also know that employment is projected to also increase by 97.5% in that same time frame. And so what we've seen is an attraction of a lot more residences, a lot more employment, and the North York Centre Plan, which I know my colleagues at City Planning, we've been in lots of conversation with them about Transform Yonge as really supporting that growth and that North York Centre concept.
Okay, and then in terms of, there's some discussion that we could put the bike lanes on Beecroft, and so those people that are going down Yonge Street from York Region, you expect them to keep going down Yonge Street. They're not going to go off into the neighborhoods and make a big loop to get around there. You would expect the same if I was riding a bike down Yonge Street. The odds are if you're riding a bike, you're just going to keep riding down Yonge Street.
I think that a cyclist will likely choose the best facility for their trip and level of skills. So if the bike lanes are on Beecroft and the connectivity to the Beecroft facility is a strong one, then they will likely take that facility. And if they are comfortable riding with mixed traffic, then they will probably continue straight. But the goal for us was to create the best option for cyclists in either of these alternatives.
Okay, and the bike lanes that are going down Beecroft, my understanding from the report is that there's some property that we would have to buy if we were going to put bike lanes on Beecroft.
Through you, north of Finch, there are some properties that we believe we would have to buy. We have since gone back to look at how we could accommodate that with less property takes in the short term, and so we believe we can drive those numbers down.
And when you say drive those numbers down, can you ballpark what the additional cost would be?
$13 million was the additional cost we brought to Pewick of that property acquisition, and we believe we can bring it down by 11.5.
From 22 to 11.5.
We believe we can bring it down from 22 to 11.5 on Beecroft.
$11.5 additional $1 million. Okay. And then my last question, I just wanted to ask, there's a reference, I believe in the report, 78 pedestrian and motor vehicle collisions and another 5 with cyclists in a 5-year period in this area. Is this high on it compared to a city average, or?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And a number of those were killed or seriously injured as a result of, I believe it was 19, over the, not just on Yonge Street, but Yonge, Doris, and Beecroft total.
Okay, and you think that was it, Councillor Ainsley?
Yes.
Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Are roads for everyone?
Through you, yes.
And are we trying to provide transportation options for Torontonians as a manner to reduce congestion?
Yes, we are, especially consistent with land use.
And do single occupancy vehicles add to congestion?
Yes.
Has it been proven that if we build cycling infrastructure, proper cycling infrastructure and proper pedestrian infrastructure, that Torontonians will choose those options?
I would, through you, Madam Speaker, I would say yes, especially if the network is connected. So network connectivity is a critical piece of giving cyclists that comfort and safety to be able to travel more frequently for more trips.
So we're looking for connectivity of our pedestrian ways, but especially our cycle routes.
We always look to connect the network.
Like the Danforth. We'll talk about that. And Councillor de Bearmaker was speaking about, Councillor Shiner, I just want Councillor de Bearmaker to hear this. So he was speaking about what makes things worse. And so I want to be more positive and talk about what makes things better. So what gets better with the Transform Yonge plan?
Well, I want to start, thank you for the question, Councillor. I want to start by saying that the impetus for the Transform Yonge project, talking about the growth that Councillor Ainsley just asked about, was really about creating a stronger, more vibrant, consistent public realm to support all the activity in the North York Centre, the small businesses, as well as the growing employment centre. And so that is a critical piece of it. As you know, with public realm, separation from existing traffic lanes and also having a managed crossing is also quite critical. So I would say that that those are critical elements of the Transform Yonge proposal.
And so those are good things?
Those are good things.
Not bad?
Not bad things.
Good.
Those are good things.
Right. So cycling, that gets better?
Does, and yep, in both alternatives.
Walking gets better?
Yep.
Public realm gets better? Vision Zero, we're moving forward, gets better?
Yes.
Air quality, reducing greenhouse gases, tree planting and succession planting gets better.
We have more capacity and opportunity to plant trees and Transform Yonge on Yonge Street, given the expanded realm width.
Which is, as
better.
we know, trees are great for everyone. And so does it create a healthier environment? Does Transform Yonge create a healthier environment for our city and for Torontonians?
Certainly healthier than the streetscape that is there today, and that was part of the intention, was to ensure that we were designing a future state that was going to support a healthy, vibrant North York Centre.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and through you to our Chief Planner, our Acting Chief Planner. With respect to the North York Centre Secondary Plan, that document has been in place, approved by Council since 2002 and approved by the OMB in 2006. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It was incorporated into the City of Toronto official plan when after amalgamation, but the actual document dates back 20 years.
And that 20-year document was setting out a very clear vision for Yonge Street with respect to setbacks and stepbacks, parks and open spaces, and creating linkages for the Yonge Street streetscape. Is that correct?
That's correct. The policy framework in the North York Centre plan really focuses Yonge Street as a main facility for public promenading and really public life. So the emphasis on, through design guidelines and other policies in the North York Centre, including a 4-meter setback, is around creating a people place. It uses the word vibrancy in order to create what you would normally expect to find in a village or a centre, or in this case, in a downtown for North York.
And would you say that a document that set out such an ambitious vision 20 years ago, do you think that the city has done a good job of trying to execute that vision, to materialize it into real everyday experiences? Have we gone fast enough and far enough?
I don't think that we've gone far enough. The 4-meter setback has certainly helped, and when you walk, cycle, or drive for that matter, the experience of the space is quite variable. This reconstruction that's scheduled to take place is a great opportunity to align the vision that's in the official plan, both the parent plan and the secondary plan, but also it's a great opportunity to really take a big, bold move and reimagine the way that public space can really work with the land use strategy. We have to remember that it's a mixed-use centre. We want mixed use in all of Toronto's urban growth centres. Being able to induce walkability through design is one of the key objectives here, and creating the amount of space that comes, I acknowledge, with both options, but certainly in a more generous fashion with the transform option, will better align with the land use policies and the overall strategy for the centre.
Thank you. And in your opinion, given the options that were before PWIC, and given the fact that this is a significant growth area, it's probably one of the fastest growing areas of the City of Toronto, which option is the right option for us?
Transform Yonge better aligns with the objectives of both the secondary plan and the official plan. Certainly the enhanced option gets us partially the way there, but Transform gets us more fully the way there.
Thank you. And then my next set of questions is for our General Manager of Transportation. Which option best responds to the 10-year cycling network, which Council supported in 2016?
Through you, both options advance the goals of the 10-year cycling network plan, again, ensuring connectivity, especially addressing critical locations and destinations like Finch subway station, as well as the Hydro Corridor Trail.
The major corridor study of Yonge Street between Shepherd Avenue and Finch Avenue was done in conjunction with the streetscape study plan, and that did not take into consideration side streets and moving cycling lanes to side streets. That's correct?
The initial the initial EA study that we are reporting out on today did not take into account the Beecroft option.
But it also did not take into consideration during the 10-year cycling plan the Beecroft option.
Through the Speaker, the 10-year cycling network plan identified a major corridor study for this section of Yonge Street, which was delivered as part. This environmental assessment study fulfills that objective. We brought forward that work in the first phase, recommending the Transform Yonge option. Council gave us direction, as you know, to look at Beecroft as an option. So, about the network connectivity in that area. So this study fulfills the requirement of the cycling network plan to look at cycling connectivity in this area.
And that's primarily because you wanted to build a dedicated, connected grid. Is that correct?
Through the Speaker, absolutely, Councillor. We're looking to provide a cycling network facility that would attract all ages and abilities and increase the volume of cyclists in North York Centre.
And you achieved that through Yonge and not Beecroft.
That was your last question. Yes.
Through the Speaker, we believe both options provide network connectivity for cycling in the area.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matlow.
Madam Speaker, Councillor de Beermaker earlier asked some questions regarding transit on Yonge and how Transform Yonge would impact it, and we heard some very, very concerning answers from TTC, I'd phrase, saying that bunching would be a problem, and they expressed concerns. Could transportation please respond to those concerns and perhaps educate us on how that fits into the big picture?
Absolutely, Councillor. Through the Speaker, we understand that approximately 2,200 buses a day come in and out of the Finch TTC and YRT bus station. and a good portion of those are going northbound on Yonge to serve routes in York Region, GO Transit routes, or TTC routes north of Finch. The Transform Yonge alternative includes a bus-only lane between the Pemberton exit and up to the northerly limit of the study area, which would serve a great deal of the buses going northerly out of the Finch station. We understand that TTC has further concerns about buses coming south from from Hendon Bishop, which is the street just north of Finch, into the Finch station as well. And what we have said is that depending on what option Council directed, through detailed design, we could certainly address some of those concerns through additional transit priority measures, additional sections of bus-only lane, and those sorts of things.
I'm confused, though. I heard Councillor de Beermaker just keep saying bad, 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 bad. But worse, 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 bad, bad, bad. But I'm hearing from you that you're saying you've addressed those concerns.
Through the Speaker, I think these are not fully addressed concerns, but we certainly have addressed the northbound movement out of the Finch station using a bus-only lane, which is included in the Transform Yonge design from the Pemberton exit up to Hendon Bishop. And we have opportunities to review other improvements through detailed design that would more address TTC's southbound concerns.
Okay, so you've worked with the TTC on this. With respect to Vision Zero, has Council directed you to make Vision Zero a priority, to make sure that the safety of pedestrians in our city is a priority?
Through you, yes.
Which option is the preferred choice with respect to protecting pedestrian safety? Which one in front of us?
Transform Yonge will do a better job of connecting pedestrians with a shorter crossing distance across the east-west corridor, which will be more important for pedestrian safety.
Is there any higher priority than protecting the lives of residents of this city?
Through you, not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much. My first question is to the General Manager of Transportation. I'm looking at page 20 of your report. That's the page that I believe Councillor de Beermaker was relying on for his questions. In it, it shows the comparative travel times for Transform Yonge and the Enhanced Yonge Transform Beecroft options. In the year 2021, am I reading this correct? The change to travel times for cars and therefore buses are the same with both options?
Through you, you are reading that correctly. It's plus 1 minute.
It's plus 1 minute, exactly the same no matter which option we put in. It's in the year 2031 where we project there would be a change.
Correct.
My next question is to Deputy City Manager Livy. Hate to do this at your last meeting. Has this council ever endorsed any transit investment that would change the travel times along Yonge Street by around the year 2031?
Madam Speaker, there is a series of reports that the City of Toronto has adopted concurring with the extension of the Yonge subway to Richmond Hill in conjunction with simultaneously putting the relief line in play. So that facility is somewhere around 2031 or beyond. Also, there is some recent discussion about the Richmond Hill GO line and improvements that might be made available there should the ownership change and revert to GO.
And Council has endorsed doing work on getting these pieces built.
That is correct. We've actually received money from
Thank you very much. Next to the General Manager of Transportation, in the modeling for 2031, did you include any of those transit options being mentioned by the Deputy City Manager in this modeling?
Through the Speaker, I'll answer for the General Manager. All the traffic modeling scenarios were developed in consultation with TTC and GO Transit, but the extension of the Yonge subway line was not assumed in this scenario.
It was not assumed. Thank you very much. To the TTC, when you were answering Councillor de Beermaker's questions, you were referring to the 2031 numbers, not the 2021 numbers. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So in 2021, when the travel times of the two options are the same, we effective, and you were consulted in the development of these numbers, you're projecting that whether we go Beecroft or whether we go Transform Yonge, the impact on traffic in that section is the same. Is that correct?
the impact on traffic is the same, but the concern that the TTC has is not regard to what option is used, is adopted, but what happens just north of Finch in terms of going from the 5 to the 6 lanes.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I've heard an answer from the general manager that we're going to consider that in the final design. I'm referring specifically to the answers you gave Councillor de Bearmaker, where he was talking about the additional 30 seconds. And you answered that the additional 30 seconds would impact thousands of bus riders and lengthen their trips. Did you not?
That's correct.
So if I'm looking instead at the 2021 numbers, and just taking it on that basis, the answer you would have given to Councillor de Bearmaker would have been they're the same in terms of travel time impacts in that stretch. Is that correct?
In terms of the options, yes, but both...
They would have been the same. Now, we heard from the Deputy City Manager. We heard from the Deputy City Manager that the modeling done here, we heard from the Deputy City Manager. Speaker, can you hold my time?
Sit down, Glenn. Can she answer the question?
She did answer the question.
Thank you.
She didn't. She was still answering. She was still answering.
Madam Speaker, I am profoundly insulted that a member of this council would stop a member of staff from completing her sentence. We should not be bullying staff. We should not be badgering staff. We should let our professional staff finish their sentences. I would ask that you will permit the staff to finish her response so that we can learn the truth, the full truth, and nothing but the truth.
So help me God, right? So thank you, Councillor de Bearmaker and Councillor, I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted. I was speaking. I was speaking. I put your time on hold. It's over there.
No, I was at 3:00.
But I put it on hold, Councillor Perks. I was a little bit distracted. I was speaking to the clerk at the time, so I apologize for that. So, Councillor Perks, please allow the staff to finish answering the question. So I'm going to go back to staff and have them complete their answer, please. And I will put your time on hold.
Through the Speaker, the options, both options as explained by my colleague from Transportation Services for traffic traveling through the corridor would be the same in terms of delays. However, if we go to transform Yonge and we are diverting traffic along Bishop to go to Doris, it will have an increased delay on buses that are going to do the south to east turn.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'll start your time. It's that time there. Okay. Okay. Okay, Councillor Perks, your next question.
Yes, and thank you for allowing staff to give me the same answer they'd given me previously. To the General Manager, you have said, I believe in answer to some other questions, that as we move further with design, you're prepared to do work to accommodate that turning movement and improve it?
We, through you, Madam Speaker, we will absolutely continue our work with the TTC to address their concerns through final design.
Thank you. Now, in terms of, like, we've already heard from you that the modeling here for 2031 does not include an assumption about building any other transit to serve this population, even though we at Council have endorsed them. Do you predict that any of that would, having those options available, together with narrowing Yonge Street, would that result, any of that result in a mode change?
Through the Speaker, certainly when the assumptions of the Yonge subway line are put into this scenario, you would see shift towards the usage of that line, particularly from York Region. We have not assumed modal shift from vehicles to cycling as a choice in this model either, and so we wanted to be conservative by not assuming that. So that should be noted as well.
Is the purpose of spending money on things like extending subways and adding service on GO lines and so on to reduce those travel times in order to change mode behavior?
That was your last question.
Through you, certainly one of the goals is to ensure that we have connectivity and access throughout the system, and shifting away from single occupant vehicle use to transit access is certainly in line with that approach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I would like to just give a nice warm welcome to the Duke of Connaught Public School kidlets from grade 5 studying civics, and they're right here in the audience, and they are looking to us to build a better city. And they're our junior counselors for future counselors, I guess I would say. Welcome. You picked a great debate.
Thank you. Councillor Pasternak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to staff, I haven't heard a lot of talk about EMS, fire, and police response times if this plan goes forward, or at least if the Yonge Street option goes forward. You've had a lot of public consultation. Were concerns raised about first responders' response times and how they'll be affected by lane closures on Yonge and potentially diverting those vehicles to Bathurst or Bayview?
Through you, Madam Speaker, we had approximately 5 meetings with fire, EMS, and police over the course of the span of doing this study. Based on their feedback, we have identified a number of mitigation measures, including the addition of rolled curbs that would allow EMS vehicles or other vehicles to get out of the way of EMS vehicles, especially with the cycle tracks on Yonge Street. We also will continue to work with our EMS colleagues to develop programs to educate drivers and cyclists regarding the use of cycle tracks so that people understand what appropriate use would be, and then look to provide breaks in the median at key locations so that EMS would have the ability to do maneuvers to get going back in the opposite direction, as well as signal preemption where necessary.
Okay, so response times will be compromised or reduced.
We have had conversations with EMS about how to manage any perceived increase in response times. They have very robust data collection that they've brought online in the last year, and so we will continue to work with them through detailed design to ensure that we are able to mitigate potential increases in response time.
Now, certainly in Ward 10 to the west of this study area, and parts of Yonge Street from Shepherd North have some of the highest concentration of seniors in the city, vulnerable seniors who rely on emergency services. Were they consulted about the fear or the risk of not being able to get to a hospital in time should there be an emergency?
Through you, we had a number of consultations over the course of the project. We had a number of seniors who were engaged in that consultation. I don't get the sense that there was specific references to concerns about emergency service. Do you have a different response?
Through the Speaker, just conferring with staff, there were some individuals who raised that concern. I think the emphasis on the fact that there are 14 lanes in this general network on minor arterial roads to serve the high-rise towers and provide access for emergency services to get people to their needed care.
Was it also mentioned that the Branchton Urgent Care Center on Finch at Bathurst has been closed, and that the distance to travel to early medical interventions has increased in Ward 10 and in Ward 23?
No, through you, Madam Speaker, no, that was not mentioned. We continue to partner with our emergency service colleagues in the city, not only about connectivity through the network, but about signal preemption and also related to access.
I'm sorry if I can put your time on hold. It's very noisy. Members of council, staff, members of the public. Thank you.
They have expressed to us interest in having a better ability to get in and out of their facilities, and so we continue to work with them on options to improve that access.
So just very quickly, it's my understanding that public realm projects of this nature that take place in other major cities have mature transit. In other words, far more mature than us. They have underground subways in which they're able to divert a lot of commuters. We don't have that. I mean, I'm talking Chicago and New York, where they've done public realm projects that trigger lane closures, are cities that are prepared for that kind of pivot or cultural change. We don't have that at Yonge and Finch, do we?
Well, I think that through you, Madam Speaker, one of the driving factors of putting this plan together was the fact that so many trips happened on the Yonge subway line, and that facility is only hopefully going to be expanded into the future. And we really did focus, in addition to access to the Finch station, to pedestrian access to get more people more easily to their subway trip, which, as we know, is a critical link in the transit network.
So just very quickly, I guess on Thursday will be the 44th anniversary of the opening of the Finch station. So the good people of Toronto have been wondering for 44 years when TTC is going to build one station north to take all that Finch chaos, the parking, the the traffic, and move it right up to the municipal boundary.
Councillor Pasternak, your time's up.
Can they answer the question?
Yes, they can answer the question.
So this may be a little unfair, but you're talking about TTC chaos. But, I mean, in reality, do you have anyone else to blame but yourselves for not getting that project done, to moving that transit chaos and gridlock one station north to the municipal boundary?
Thank you.
Just to follow up on, through the Speaker, just to follow up on what the Deputy City Manager spoke of earlier, is that we are actively working now on a possible extension of the Yonge line, which would divert some of those buses from Finch Station to station further north, like Steeles and Comer. So if all goes well, by 2031, we should see some improvements in that area.
Thank you. Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My first question relates to, if I understood correctly, the answers to option one, that is to say transform Yonge. I heard that one of the consequences of electing that option, notwithstanding that it has great benefits from the public realm perspective, is that there is spillover of travel of vehicles onto either Bathurst or Bayview. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Speaker, when we looked at the network, we did consider the access and capacity on Bayview and Bathurst. We looked most closely, I would say, at the capacity on Doris and Beecroft, which were designed, the ring roads, to take in extra capacity across those 14 lanes for the North York Centre.
But there is additional capacity, I heard you say, on both Bayview and Bathurst.
Neither of those streets are operating at full capacity.
Understood.
Today.
But notwithstanding that they're not operating at full capacity, did anybody bother consulting people who may own property on those streets that look forward to perhaps developing their properties, understanding that their redevelopments would in fact require transportation capacity? Now, so if we're taking away capacity from those property owners, did anybody bother telling them that, hey, you might have an interest here?
Through you, Madam Speaker, the study area and the mailings that we did to encourage people to come to meetings and such included properties in that area as well.
I see.
So they were part of our broader engagement.
And you
I can't speak to how many attended.
You explained, notwithstanding that you notified them, you explained that perhaps their interest would be compromised going forward.
We explained over the course of the EA process the modifications and changes that were being proposed.
All right. So one of the key objective, from what I understand, for Transform Yonge is that there is a real emphasis on safety, people being able to cross, pedestrians being able to cross on an east-west axis. My point is, could that not also be accomplished by perhaps changing the duration time of signal lights to allow people to walk across?
Through you, you can certainly modify signal lengths. As you know, in any kind of network, there's always implications when you modify signals. But yes, we could certainly address the signal timing. The difference is, though, that you have a wider pavement width to cross when you're crossing over 6 lanes as opposed to 4 lanes. So the exposure for pedestrians crossing that street is going to be less in Transform Yonge than it is going to be in Enhance at a 6-lane.
And would you also agree that if you have 6 lanes, let's say, coming south on Yonge Street, and then you narrow or you bottleneck to 4 lanes, that has implications for people as well?
It has implications, and it's one of the reasons why we've created a number of improvements to signals and parking restrictions to encourage people to be able to access the ring roads more easily than they are today.
Okay. And so, given that a lot of people have to make adjustments, you're saying those adjustments are negligible based on the benefits that we get in the context of the public realm being improved. And I'm looking at the incremental improvement in public realm between option 1 and option 2.
So through you, Madam Speaker, the improvement in the public realm is not just width, which is critical and important. It's also consistency and application of better design treatments. But in terms of the traffic traveling through the area as we have modeled it using that 14 lanes, we believe that the impact to traffic through that area is going to be negligible, or about a minute of increase over time in our 2021 and 2031 modeling.
Okay, so if I can use this language, perhaps you can tell me which option are you really recommending? And the language I'm going to use is, there is a solution that maximizes the public realm. There is also a solution that optimizes public realm. So are we looking for a solution that maximizes, or rather an optimal solution that basically considers the interest of multiple stakeholders?
Through you, both options improve the public realm. Transform Yonge expands the public realm more than enhance.
Right, at the expense of somebody, because I mean there are no
One includes...
Well, a better option in the context of the public realm.
One retains...
Not a better option for other people.
The difference is the 4 lanes versus the 6 lanes in terms of how that space is used.
Right, and creating bottlenecks is in the public realm. It might not be in the public interest, by the way. It might expand the public realm benefits, but it might not be in the public interest.
Well, through you, the other issue that I think is very important here is that the access to the subway and to the transit line is critical and is being accessed largely in the study area south of Finch to Shepherd by people walking to the transit facility. And so enhanced public realm has always been at the core of this program, not only from an employment center.
No, Councillor DeGiorgio, you're way over time because you're asking and answering a question at the same time. No, I'm sorry, Councillor DeGiorgio. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Karygiannis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to staff. Can you please advise us what measures we've done, what work we've done in order to educate pedestrians when they cross the street and how they're getting affected, the 6 lanes versus the 4 lanes?
Through you, specifically to this project, what measures we've incorporated in terms of Vision Zero?
Yes.
Well, certainly everything that we have done since we launched Vision Zero has been public and accessible to everybody in the city. We had a number of boards that went out at meetings talking about impacts and crashes related to people, largely pedestrians, in the study area. And then we also talked about a number of the improvements that were being proposed in terms of shortening crossing distances, adding signals along long blocks, expanding the median as ways to enhance and support pedestrian safety.
How many accidents have we had in that stretch in the last 7 years? I can't remember.
So there's 78 in total. That's Doris, Beecroft, and Yonge. 19 of those were resulted in killed or seriously injured people, and 8 of those on Yonge were pedestrians, and the remainder of those, Doris and Beecroft, were pedestrians as well.
If we narrow, if we put the proposal that you're saying forward, what would that translate? How many? What do you forecast the number to be in the next 7 years?
Through you, I couldn't forecast and pick a specific number, but we were very clear on the design improvements in trying to improve connectivity for pedestrians, and minimize crossing distances, and provide a safe and accessible public realm, which are all features that enhance safety for pedestrians.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Speaker. How often do we rebuild streets?
Through you, I have somewhat of a short timer's attitude about, or at least previously, I don't know. Typically, we do it because they're very costly in terms of a street design and reconstruction of this magnitude.
Yes.
The street longevity is usually about 50 years. It's not that we would not make modifications to streets in between that time frame, but a major reconstruction.
Major reconstruction.
We typically build them for about 50 years.
I've been told it's generally 75 years in Toronto.
They say 50 to 75.
Okay, between 50 to 75 years before we have an opportunity to rebuild, and that means the public realm, the road, all of the components of what we know makes up a safe and complete street.
Certainly a major reconstruction that's touching all the aspects that you describe is typically once in a 50 to 75 year time frame.
So once in a lifetime, virtually, we will have an opportunity to build a complete street on Yonge in this area.
Through you, that is correct. It doesn't mean that we can't improve and enhance as we move forward, which we always try to do.
So just so I understand the discussion about travel time, we're talking about 1 minute of travel time in 2021 and potentially an impact in 2031, but it could be mitigated through design changes on the other streets.
That would be our intention.
Okay. When did we pass our policy on complete streets?
I'm sorry, Councillor. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
When did we pass our policy on complete streets?
Through you, that came to Council in, I believe, June of 2016.
And wasn't it at the time that we committed ourselves to build complete streets opportunistically when we were going to be reconstructing roads?
Through you, that is my understanding.
So is this not exactly the time and place where we should be making our policy real and building a complete street?
Through you, that was our intention in the work that we undertook through this EA, was to address not only the land use plans that came out of the official plan, but also to implement complete streets, enhance and implement recommendations of the 10-year cycling plan, as well as the congestion management plan.
So we put it all together in this plan, and it reinforces the secondary plan that's long-standing for this portion of North York.
Yes, that was at the core of our assumptions moving forward.
Are other cities doing this?
Through you, yes, they are.
Is there any reason why Toronto shouldn't?
Through you, not that I can see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to the General Manager, I heard something interesting. We were talking about travel times a moment ago, and you mentioned that the travel times were based on 14 lanes. Have I got that correct? Did the modeling look at 14 lanes of traffic, which I'm assuming includes Doris and Beecroft as part of the system?
Yes. Through the Speaker, yes. The model actually took into account more than 14 lanes.
Understood.
I'm referring to 14 lanes.
So if I'm a car driver going down Yonge Street and staying on Yonge Street, the traffic modeling may not be exactly accurate. You're looking at a systematic view, assuming that drivers will leave Yonge Street and use the unused capacity of those side streets. That's the modeling.
Through the Speaker, it would assume that some vehicles would choose to make that change,
Right.
but we do have an account for the Yonge travel time change would be 2 minutes in a Transform Yonge in 2031 scenario, or 1.5 minutes in an Enhanced Yonge scenario. So that assumes that the driver stays on Yonge.
Stays on Yonge. Okay, that's very important. Over to you, to the Chief Planner. The North York secondary plan is very prominent in this report. In the transportation section, in subsection 4.2b, it talks about acquiring additional lands for the widening of arterial roads, providing capacity for the development. Is that the 4 meters that we've been accumulating along Yonge Street?
Through you, Madam Speaker, the 4 meter setback is in reference to setting buildings back from the street line to improve the public realm on the private side of the line.
Okay. So 4.1 says the full achievement for the potential development proposed by this secondary plan, which is the North York Centre, requires a supporting transportation system. And then it goes on in 4.2, and I wonder if you could confirm to me, the following transportation network improvements have been identified as necessary. The widening of Shepherd Avenue between Beecroft Road and Bayview Avenue to 6 lanes, the construction of a Shepherd subway. Other improvements, which may include the widening of Finch Avenue to 6 lanes plus turning lanes from Bathurst to Bayview, the widening of Shepherd Avenue to 6 lanes plus turning lanes from Beecroft Road to Bathurst Street, new rapid transit lines, of course, and improved connections to Highway 401 from Yonge Street. Are those all part of this North York secondary plan?
I believe they are. I believe some of those listed have been implemented, and transportation can comment on others. I would just comment, however, that policy framework is 20 years old, and it's warranted for a review given the type of planning that we're doing now to drive the city in a different direction with our modality and our other mixed-use land use pattern.
But the concept is, and it talks about not allowing zoning changes unless road capacity is there to support the neighbor. That was the idea, right, was that you'd build up the streets so that you could actually support the development in the area.
At the time, that may have been the idea. That would not be my advice today.
Thank you. Someone talked about York Region, and I was wondering, the basic question is, are there 3 lanes from York Region all the way down to 401, and in fact, 3 lanes in either direction on Yonge Street all the way down to that point and beyond? I think it goes down to York Mills. Is that correct? So what's people have been talking about some change in York Region. Could someone mention what that is? North of Steeles.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I didn't fully hear the question.
Can you confirm there's 3 lanes from York Region all the way down Yonge Street to 401?
Within the City of Toronto, from York Mills north to the Steeles border, yes.
And there's some talk about York Region making changes to their plans about narrowing their roads and making bike lanes north of Steeles. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor. The York Region's planning documents speak to having bike lanes on Yonge Street north of Steeles.
And when do they plan to do that?
Through the Speaker, that would be in conjunction with the implementation of the subway.
The implementation of a subway, and we don't know when that's going to be, but it's quite some time. Okay. I guess one last, I get time for just a little bit. Can someone tell me what percentage of the properties along this Yonge Street area have acquired that 4-meter setback, which would provide public realm in addition to the existing 2-meter sidewalk? Is it a high percentage?
I believe it's approximately 50%.
50%. How many properties are left to acquire to have that full setback?
I think it's an expression of 50% of the area we may have generated the 50%, and we have another 50%.
We don't know how many properties that is
I don't have a property count, no. I'm talking about the aggregate distance.
And the last thing, I guess, the new proposed, one of the designs in there talks about increasing the width of the center island from the existing 3 meters, because I measured that on iView, to 4.5. Why would we put public realm onto the center island as opposed to the sidewalks, where everyone talks about wanting additional space? And in that, with that question is what's the
Councillor,
delta?
this is your last question.
I got it. And what is the delta? How many millimeters or inches are we gaining between a conversion of a driven lane, to a cycle track?
Sorry. Okay, you can answer.
Through the Speaker, the reason for increasing the width of the median, one is to increase the plantable space so that can be it can have the landscape median that's attractive, and the second reason is to address the having the corridor be symmetrical, and to provide space for signals and to have space for left turn lanes when that median is dropped, in order to have space for left turn lane at an intersection.
So please, if you want the staff to answer your questions, try to make your questions very short, because it's hard for the staff to comment if your questions are 2 minutes long. I'd appreciate it. Before we continue, I just want to acknowledge former Councillor Norm Gardner in the Council chambers. Welcome. Councillor Layton to speak, questions.
Yes, Madam Speaker. He's a little shy, but Councillor DeGiorgio is hoping to get a point of personal privilege. That was your point of order. Okay, he was a bit shy to jump in there. Thanks, Joe.
Okay,
Thanks.
I'll restart your time. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just on that last point about the center median, did I just hear correctly that it was widened to facilitate vehicle movements?
Through the Speaker, there are multiple reasons to suggest it should be widened. One is to facilitate left turn movements at intersections. Another is for the plantable space within that landscape median and to provide space for the signal poles that need to be in the center along this street.
And one would assume that the addition of a left turn lane is to facilitate road movements and drivers.
Through the Speaker, in most locations, this would not be in a new left turn lane. It would be extending the median to facilitate the left turn lanes around the existing roadway.
Can I just, can we examine the chart on page 20 just a little bit more? I know we got into it a second ago, because the conclusion that's in the written body doesn't seem to support the difference in time from one option, transform Yonge, to the other option. It suggests that there's one preferred option over another with respect to the movement of vehicles, and they seem rather similar.
Through the Speaker, the options are very similar to the do-nothing scenario. Because of traffic being generated in the area with growth, we would see the traffic travel times change anyway. And so in the 2021 version, both options perform the same with regard to general traffic along this section of the corridor. And in 2031, we project that the enhanced Yonge option will perform at a 30 seconds better than the increase on transform Yonge.
So with respect to travel times, they're relatively similar?
That's correct.
In your predictions. With respect to economic activity, it says that under the Transform TO plan, there's a significant improvement in economic activity, local economic activity, that doesn't exist in the other plan. Is that true?
Through you, the build-out of especially Employment Center in North York is well supported by an enhanced public realm, and as well as pedestrian safety and connectivity to the transit network and a vibrant streetscape. And so in as much as Transform Yonge enhances those options beyond what the Enhance Yonge option has, yes, that would be supporting.
So those economic benefits exist, or that the benefit to economic activity exists in the case of Transform TO, but not in the case of the alternative option that's being presented.
I don't know about that. What do you think?
That's what's written in the report.
Certainly the public realm aspect.
The alternative provides minimal support of economic activity.
Certainly the enhancement and the space generated with regard to the public realm was really the focal point that we heard, especially from another number of employers who were trying to locate there, wanting to enhance that public realm to support their facilitation of their employees.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just to confirm the cost difference, so it's listed in the report as a $20 million cost difference. You think you can get it down to about a $10 million cost difference, correct?
That's correct, Councillor. The Enhanced Yonge Transform Beecroft option in the report includes 4 lanes on Beecroft for the entire length, including north of Finch. If you have you don't increase the number of lanes on Beecroft from the existing 3 or 2 lanes for most of it north of Finch, you can reduce the costs by accommodating fully separated cycle tracks to meet the Finch Hydro Corridor.
Now, can we assume, though, if we don't do the lane expansion or the addition of lanes, that the chart table 1 on page 20 with respect to the changes in travel time on Beecroft should be higher?
Through the Speaker, we haven't modeled an option of not increasing the number of lanes on Beecroft between Finch and Hendon.
But if to go by the assumption that that TTC staff went by, that less lanes mean greater travel time, that would also be the case on Beecroft, correct?
The volume on traffic on what is actually Greenview, the northerly extension of Beecroft between Finch and Hendon, is not as high as the southerly section today.
I'm going to ask 2 quick questions. York Region are planning to go to 4 lanes, correct, on Yonge Street?
That's correct. That's what's in their planning documents.
Okay. And then finally, it says that that the option of Transform Yonge, one of the reasons why in the overall recommendation section was that there would be less disruption to the North York Centre. Please take whatever time you need to explain what that means.
Through the Speaker, that reference was in terms of the construction timeframe. Reconstructing 2 roads, we would take between 3 and 4 years, whereas reconstructing 1 road, being Yonge Street, would take between 1 and 2. So the reference to disruption is with regards to the construction disruption.
Okay, Councillor Layton, your time is up. Thank you. Councillor Perruzza.
Yeah, if I were creating a downtown, which of these options would better sort of fulfill that vision?
Through you, an option that created a 4-lane section, which is what is proposed in Transform Yonge, would be better at connectivity, about pedestrian safety, about creating a vibrant center. And so that is why, in terms of how both options, both viable options, we've stacked them up against our criteria, we've recommended Transform.
So if I were to be creating a downtown North York, let's say, in your professional opinion, what did you say, the Transform Yonge Street would say downtown?
And keep people up.
Through you, that was our intention, and that is what we put forward, so yes.
Thank you.
Fillion, you didn't ask a question yet? Okay, Councillor Fillion, you're the last.
First, a question of the Transportation General Manager. If this was now 4 lanes, would there be any thought to widening it to 6? Even if we had the space, would that even be something we'd think about?
Through you, it's not likely. I mean, it depends, as I would say, on the conditions by which we would be examining that, but it's not likely.
If we had the space to widen Yonge Street to 6 lanes all the way down to the lake shore, if we had the space, would we think that was a good idea?
For vehicle lanes?
Yes.
Not given that there's a subway that travels under it, and we're trying to encourage complete streets and more pedestrian and cycling activity in the city.
Right. Generally speaking, does having a 6-lane road where the 905 meets the City of Toronto, does that decrease traffic congestion in the City of Toronto?
Not typically.
So it's not something, we shouldn't be trying to have 6 lanes at all of the major roads where the 905 meets the 416 in order to decrease congestion.
Well, through you, the expansion of roadway is impactful, and as you know, takes up land, right? So in a scenario where you have 6 lanes that are managed, so you might have surface transit lanes, or you might have cycling lanes to manage the demand for the land use. But in just terms of 6 general purpose travel lanes, not typically what we would look at.
So would it be safe to say that in the 1950s, 60s, even the 70s, people thought that the way to relieve traffic congestion was to make more lanes? 50 years later, 60 years later, our thinking has changed. That is not the way to ease traffic congestions. The way to ease traffic congestion is to have complete streets, better transit, better cycling and pedestrian routes. Would that be correct?
Correct, and also to manage that congestion more actively through signal enhancements and through the broader use of the network.
So Transform Yonge, if one is a congestion fighter, Transform Yonge is a viable way, is a realistic way of trying to deal with traffic congestion?
Especially through you, especially since we have included modifications to increase capacity on the ring roads.
If York Region goes to 2 lanes, which they will, just a question of when, and they certainly will sometime over the next 60 years, what does it do if we have two lanes coming from York Region, and then it opens up as it hits the 416, it opens up into 6 lanes? What's that going to do to our goal of trying to have people take other modes of transit to come into Toronto?
It's hard to envision, but I would assume that it would attract more vehicles to that section of North York Centre.
And just to go over the construction time again, because there are, I believe, if we choose the Beecroft option, there are 3 construction projects that need to happen, one being Yonge Street, one being Beecroft, and the other being connecting up Doris through to Avondale. So it looks to me like if you did, we have to do the Avondale to Yonge, we have to do to Shepherd, we have to do the Yonge Street, so those 2 together are going to be about 4 years. If we add Beecroft, am I correct that we're looking at potentially at least a minimum of 4 years and up to 6 years of traffic chaos caused by construction? Would that be correct?
We have at least through the end of this year, should Council take an action today, to finish design, and then we believe it'll be a 1 to 2 year design time frame for the transform alternative and a 3 to 4 year time frame of construction for the enhance.
Right, so it's an extra 2 years on top of, but you're not adding on the Doris. That would Doris and Beecroft presumably cannot be done together because they're the two service roads. They would have to be done one after the other.
That was your last question?
That would be in the 2 year time frame that we've described.
Thank you. Councillor Shiner.
Sorry, thank you. I got lost in that last question. 1 to 2 years on Yonge Street because most of the design work is done. It's 3 to 4 years because you have to do the design work on the other one, on the plan from committee. Is that correct?
Through the Speaker, we have gotten to the point of 30% design on both alternatives. They're at an equal stage of design. That additional design work needs to take place for about another year to get it to a tendered package. The Transform Yonge alternative would take 1 to 2 years of construction, inclusive of the Doris extension, which is part of this package as the service road extension in the area. The Enhanced Yonge Transform Beecroft would be additional 2 years.
Because?
Because you're reconstructing Beecroft.
Can't be construct both at the same time? Are you doing them simultaneously?
You wouldn't do parallel roads at the same time. You wouldn't do Beecroft and Yonge Street at the same time. That would be very disruptive.
So it's simply because you want to schedule the work. Now, the question that my colleague had was, would you widen the road? Well, of course we wouldn't widen the road now to put that in, but you have the road there. Was there another option that we weren't presented with?
Through you, Madam Speaker, we did look at an option just recently that would also go to 4 lanes, would retain the cycle facility on Beecroft, but expand the public realm and with lay-bys to access the adjacent businesses. We have not brought that option forward.
But that was a good plan for you. You supported that as much as the bike lane plan if you were going to go that way? Because it narrowed the pinch points where people crossed?
That's correct, and it still included a fully separated cycle facility to get up to the Hydro Corridor Trail.
On Beecroft, so you were supporting a plan is just as much as the plan that my colleague is looking for, that had the bike lanes on Beecroft, but the difference was that the parking on Yonge Street really was there all the time because they were median, because they were
lay-bys.
Lay-bys.
Correct. Yes, and through you, in all fairness, that's a very early option, but it is one that we wanted to determine if we could make that work.
Okay. Traffic. You were telling me about capacity on Bayview and on Bathurst Street. Well, I drive on Bayview in the morning, and from Highway 401, if I drive up it, I drive up past Empress, I drive up past Finch, I drive up past Cummer, and it is bumper to bumper every morning. So where is the capacity? Because that is the biggest complaint that the residents have there is no more ability for them to get out to Bayview Avenue and use it in the morning rush hours.
Through the Speaker, there certainly can be challenges with peak hour capacity on any of these roads or on many arterials in the city. When you look at all-day capacity, there's certainly...
So peak hour capacity. Is there any peak hour capacity on Bayview?
I don't have the peak hour numbers in front of me, Councillor. The all-day numbers indicate there is capacity
But,
on...
sorry, the issue is rush hour, in fairness. Madam Speaker. Okay, so I'll just hang around and dance. Councillor Nunziata, I was trying to... My time's been running off now for nothing. I'm trying to get an answer to a question that's gotten very noisy in the room. It's a very simple question. I don't care what happens at midnight. I don't care what happens at 5 in the morning or 12 noon. Rush hour capacity. How much capacity can you tell me today that there is on Bathurst, on Leslie, on Bayview, on Yonge Street? How much capacity is left at that time?
Through the Speaker, what we do see with peak hour capacity is that it tends to spread. And so the peak hour is no longer 1 hour. It tends to be on a half hour before and after that as well. I do not have numbers, Councillor.
At 8 o'clock in the morning, how
about
much...
Bayview, Leslie, Bathurst. I don't have those
how
numbers
can
in
you
front
tell
of me.
Okay, Councillor Shiner, please allow the staff to answer the question and stop interrupting, please.
So how can you tell us there's capacity during the rush hour periods at all when you've told me now that rush hour keeps getting longer and longer and longer because of what?
2 reasons, Councillor. One is because...
Is it traffic?
Councillor Shiner.
I didn't finish my question. Sorry, I have a right to finish my question as well. Is it not because of all of the traffic that's on Bayview and Leslie and Bathurst Street? And is that not why rush hour keeps getting longer and longer and longer?
Through the Speaker, from the modeling that we've done, we understand that the impacts on Bayview and Bathurst would be minimal, and we understand, based on experience, that peak hour capacity spreads on roads throughout the city.
So they're going to spread them throughout the residential areas. Is that correct?
Through you, the model, Councillor Shiner, that we developed was looking at the impacts to congestion from these 2 alternatives, not including general growth in capacity. So your experience on Bayview and Bathurst, I have no doubt is an accurate experience, and I believe the rush hour on many of our major corridors is quite where most of those streets are at capacity. We can manage some of that through signals and timing and other traditional tools. With the growth in the city, having better transit access and more alternatives is going to be our plan moving forward.
Madam Speaker, I had one more question, and my time was running when I was trying to get your attention.
Your
Could I place
time's up.
it? I would like to place a last question. You were busy talking to my colleagues. I was trying to get your
Councillor
attention.
Shiner, I put your timer on hold 3 times.
So I would like to ask my last question.
Well, ask your last question.
Thank you.
And stop badgering me.
Stop badgering me. How many accidents and deaths have you had records of on any of the side streets where you want this extra traffic to go?
Through you, on Doris and Beecroft, I believe we had 10 crashes involving pedestrians on Doris and many fewer on Beecroft, 4 on Beecroft. And I don't have numbers for Bathurst and Bayview.
Thank you. Councillor DiCiano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a quick question to staff. I understand that accessibility advocates had some concerns. Were those concerns addressed by staff?
Through the Speaker, both options allow for, through detailed design, to be able to accommodate Wheel-Trans loading and unloading along the corridor. So certainly the concerns of the accessibility in terms of drop-offs can be addressed. What we see in terms of accessible movement along the corridor is an increase in accessibility for both options, because the existing surface of the sidewalk is broken, it's in disrepair, and so our main objective here is to improve the public realm by making that smooth, and which improves accessibility in both options.
Fair enough, but when people are getting off Wheel-Trans or off buses, they are being offloaded into the bike lane, is my understanding. How do we make sure that, is there additional signage being introduced? How do we make sure that cyclists understand that there's a caution when this process occurs? And how safe is it?
Through the Speaker, as I mentioned, this would be an issue that would be designed into the ultimate plan to be constructed. On other locations, we have laybys that address the place for the Wheel-Trans vehicle to come in and make that loading and unloading and take place.
Oh, okay, so it's not actually a solution that's come before us today. It's a solution that has to be developed?
Through the Speaker, we have experience in introducing these types of solutions in other corridors, and that's what we would do in the next stage of design. At a 30% level of design, we haven't gotten into those types of details.
Okay, and then just for clarity purposes, what types of solutions have you brought forward in the past, or have expertise in bringing forward, that is going to allow the safe crossing of those with accessibility issues through the bike lanes?
Through the Speaker, I'll give you an example on the Wellesley cycle track, where the Wheel-Trans vehicle comes directly to the curb and the cyclist is able to go around that Wheel-Trans vehicle doing the loading. Sherburne has other examples where there's a lay-by and Wheel-Trans uses those facilities to come in away from the traffic in the through lane and do the loading and unloading. In some cases, cyclists can go to the right. In other cases, they exit the cycle track and go around on the left. So it is a very site-specific solution.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's it for the questions, I believe. Okay, we'll go to speakers now. Mayor Tory to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a motion which I would ask if the clerk will put it up, and it addresses something that's been on the minds of us all, and certainly mine too, and I want to make it abundantly clear through this proposed amendment that we would not only conduct an immediate safety review of the existing Yonge Street, as it were, to look at every possible improvement we could make, including but not limited to crosswalk timing, pavement markings, narrowing of lanes, but then also to make sure that pedestrian safety and the objectives of Vision Zero are met in the plan going forward, whatever that plan is that the Council might approve. And so I would commend that to your consideration and support. Madam Speaker, the plan that I support ensures that this section of Yonge Street gets public realm improvements that it badly needs, that it gets cyclist lanes that will operate on two parallel streets. And we heard the General Manager of Transportation and the others from the staff indicate that both produced, I wrote the words down, dedicated, separated bike facilities. Both do that, both of the options that are before us today. The option that I support ensures, and the motion is meant to make sure that it is the case, that pedestrian safety measures are implemented. And finally, that motorists and public transit vehicles are able to move by maintaining the lanes of traffic that we have. They may be narrower, they may be different, but the bottom line is that they will be there. And I found very interesting the discussion of transit vehicles and the fact that I'm not sure that enough was made of that in the report based on what came out in the debate this morning, because you have tens of thousands of people, literally more than 1,000 buses, I think the number, I wrote it down somewhere here, but 1,300 bus trips per day that are going to be affected by this. And people can quibble about they're affected only by the part at the north or the south or the east or the west, but the bottom line is they're going to be affected for the livelihood and the experience of those transit users that we're trying to encourage to use public transit, especially given the fact that we know we have a subway capacity problem until we get done some of the other projects that we're working on. I campaigned on supporting bike lanes that are safe, separated, and sensible. Those were the words that I used. I believe this option produces bike lanes that are safe, separated, and sensible. And actually, there's quite a bit of support for the notion of putting the bike lanes on Beecroft, because it just makes sense. It is actually a place I would argue that, and I won't say that I have the expertise to determine this, but I would think there's common sense reason to believe this could be safer on a street like Beecroft than elsewhere, but fine, even if it isn't, it is, as the general manager herself said. Now, I've been looking for support for the notion of bike lanes on Beecroft without reducing lanes of traffic, and I had some emails telling me that it was a sensible thing to do, and I was looking for support anywhere I could find it, and I found it in the most unlikely place, where I have here a brochure that talked about the person writing it says, I've initiated a plan for one-way cycling routes on Doris and Beecroft without reducing lanes of traffic. The person stood for office on the basis of that. Now, would that be, let's see, let's do multiple choice. Might that be Giorgio Mammoliti? Could be. Might it be Denzel Menon Wong? Or is it possible it could be Councillor John Fillion? So, you know, this just says to me, Madam Speaker, that while everybody's entitled to change their view and change their perspective, the fact is that this is a legitimate option. And that's all that I, you know, sort of put forward here, and the vote will be what the vote is, and people will vote for the options. But I think both are things that are legitimate options. And putting bike lanes on Beecroft mean we get bike lanes that are safe and dedicated and in a sensible place. This is one of the most congested places in the city. I asked for a list, and I didn't prejudice where it was or who did the calculation or how they did it, and they came back to me, our city staff, saying that this was one of the most congested places in the whole city, one of the 10 most congested places. And this isn't just about cars, it's about people doing business, commerce, and trucks, but it's also, as we heard this morning, about transit vehicles. In the end, it's about moving people. And I agree with those who say, and I've tried to follow this as often as is practical, that we can't plan the whole city around cars and around traffic. But nor can we plan the city on the basis that we ignore that there are people who are going to drive cars wherever they come from. If they're coming in here from York Region, they're coming here to work or to spend money or invest or do business. They're not the enemy that's invading the city. They're people that are coming here, and lots of people are driving around inside the city. And so I simply proceed from the premise that we can't afford to ignore those people, you know, as we go about making our plans. And so I would just say, ladies and gentlemen, that I've tried to advance a position that is consistent with what I believe my responsibility is here, which is that I have to represent a balance of all interests and serve the public interest at the same time, but that includes making sure that we address the needs of pedestrians, of the public realm overall, of businesses, of pedestrians, of car drivers, yes, of transit users, of cyclists. And I think this option allows us to move forward and do something that will address the concerns in a positive way of all of those people in the best interests of the City of Toronto taken as a whole. And so that is why I urge you to support my motion on safety, to make sure that's abundantly clear, but that is why I support this option, and I commend members of Council to do the same if they would. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. We do have a question for you. Councillor Fillion.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that you put forward some motions regarding safety. Are you aware that every organization in the city and beyond that is interested in pedestrian and cycling safety opposes the Beecroft option and supports Transform?
I'm aware through you, Madam Speaker, that there's been quite a campaign on to have people talk about that, but I'm also aware of the fact that, as we will have to do with many streets in Toronto where we won't be reducing the number of lanes, that there are ways in which, and my motion is meant to facilitate that, there are ways in which we can make this street much safer in its present form, because this construction, I might add, Madam Speaker, is not scheduled to begin for some time, nor is this matter budgeted. So while we sort all of that out, there's plenty of time to make immediate improvements, which I want to see made in Yonge Street in the area we're talking about, so as to cut the accidents and fatalities and so on to zero. And there are ways, I believe, with the new construction, if it stays at 6 lanes of traffic, that we can make it much safer and make the necessary improvements through the means I mentioned, narrowing lanes, using signals, using signal timing, and so on.
So you'd mentioned that the Beecroft option has, quote, quite a bit of support. So is there any organization that you know of that that advocates for pedestrian and cycling safety who supports the Beecroft option? You said it has quite a bit of support. I'm not aware of any.
I was talking about support that I've heard from the public, and I guess, again, in the midst of all the fancy titles that come to us of all the people, you know, that are supporting things, we forget there is a public out there who, many of whom never belong to an organization, never sign up to one, don't know what those organizations are saying. And I've just said that I've had feedback from the public who have said, not that they necessarily know one option deserves a 96 and the other one a 92, but rather they say that the option that I support was one that they thought was balanced and did certainly, from the standpoint of cycling infrastructure, produce an answer that I believe our own officials said was a safe, dedicated cycling track that will serve the interests of cyclists. And I believe the measures that we take here on safety will make sure, as we should be, even if we weren't touching this street. If we were not touching this street, the measures that I talked about in this motion that I moved as an amendment here will ensure, I hope, that we will address those questions
Let's
as well.
go to the public. You talked about the public. Is there a single ratepayer homeowner association leader that's in favor of Beecroft? And I know they asked for a meeting with you. I don't know whether that happened. I believe it didn't. But are you aware of any community leader that supports Beecroft?
I wasn't aware, Madam Speaker, through you, of a request for a meeting, and I apologize if I didn't get that done before this debate. It probably came very recently.
Month and a half ago.
But having said that, I know that you're very familiar with that, and I know you spent a lot of time with them, and I respect that, you know, talking to them about this. I would just say to you that I don't think that is the measure of either what's right to do, nor is it the measure of what the public generally think about these things. The fact that these people in these organizations, the presidents and so on, have spoken up to you about it. I don't dismiss their opinions, but their opinions are their opinions, and there are lots of other opinions out there too.
Your rationale was that it has quite a lot of support, so you can't name a single organization that supports it, a single homeowners association that supports it. Can you name a single urban thinker like the group that has come forward that opposes it? Is there anybody missing from that list? Is there? You seem to want to dismiss that group like David Crombie and Ken Greenberg.
Madam
and
Speaker,
Jennifer
please
Keesbat.
don't misunderstand, through you to the member. I don't mean to dismiss anybody's point of view. I specifically said that. I respect the fact that those people have spoken up and said what they did, including people who are very long-standing friends of mine. And in politics and in government, we have disagreements on some of these kinds of things. But I also don't think you can dismiss the fact that I have, as the mayor, and I sit here as one vote out of the 45 that will cast a vote, but I am the mayor and I have citywide responsibilities, and I have the responsibility as well to try to support things that I think are balanced in their consideration of all the different groups that I have a responsibility to represent. So I don't dismiss those people, but nor do I say that because they said they had a particular view on this, that that's the view that I have to share, especially in light of the fact that, as I said, I believe the option that I support has legitimacy in terms of what it does for cyclists, pedestrians, improved public realm, cars, transit vehicles, and pedestrians, if I forgot that.
I'm going to try to get in one last question. Do you really believe that the best way to fight congestion is to have a 6-lane highway coming down from the 905 for the next 60 years?
Well, it's interesting because, Madam Speaker, through you were sort of asking questions of the staff on the basis somehow that somebody was suggesting expanding this road to 6 lanes of traffic. And if you said that was the proposal on the table, I'm not sure whether I'd be supporting it or not. But when you take into account the fact that we can have cycling infrastructure, public realm improvement, and at the same time keep transit and other vehicles moving, acknowledging the reality that they're there and they have to move in the interests of the economy, the environment, families, and a number of other things, and just in the interest of balance, then I'd say to you, we don't have on the table some proposal to expand the road to 6 lanes. We simply have on the table, thanks to this option that I'm supporting, the proposal to leave 6 lanes of traffic there at the present time, put the cycling in a place where I think it'll be safer and better and sensible and effective, and take safety measures to make sure that pedestrians are safer than they are today.
That was your last question. Okay, Councillor Mammoliti, question to the mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I'm supportive of our committee's recommendations, and I'm glad that you are as well. And at that particular meeting, I'm not sure if you watched it or not, but there were a number of community groups that came forward completely opposed to what the local councillor wants to do. Did you hear that or no?
I did. I watched bits and pieces of it, and I heard about it later, including, I would add, a group that we haven't heard from when Councillor Fillion was listing, through you, Madam Speaker, the groups that had signed up to support it, and I respect that, the business groups, which I think are another important element of a lively street and a lively neighborhood and a lively city. I think a lot of them were opposed to this.
So I'm glad you said that. There's a number of different businesses that are afraid of what the councillor's position is going to do to their businesses. And we heard that loud and clear. Another one was the former councillor for the area, Councillor Gardner. And I believe he's actually here today. Norm Gardner's here today to listen in, because he's completely opposed to this too. And I'm not sure if you know his level of involvement in that particular community, but for years he knew what the issues were, and he still does. Would you agree with that?
Again, I did see some of his opposition at the committee hearings. And look, through you, Madam Speaker, I respect the fact this has become, I don't think it had to be, but I think it's become a divisive issue. I think it's become sort of portrayals of black and white. I've tried, not even in my remarks today, to portray it as black and white in terms of one option being legitimate and the other not legitimate. I just think in this case that there is a way in which we can achieve all of the things that we're trying to achieve for cyclists, for public realm, for pedestrians, for drivers and transit vehicles, and do it through this option that I support.
So you've driven through that particular community, I take it, and at particular parts of the day you can't even drive that community. It's bumper to bumper. Would you agree with me?
I would just say through you to the member, Madam Speaker, that I went through there on a Sunday, last Sunday, because I was up on the north end of Yonge Street, just north of the area, or actually it's probably part of the area, visiting with the Iranian community on the eve of Nowruz. And coming back down south on Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock, it was traffic chaos. And so that is why I have said in the end that the solution to me for now doesn't represent taking away lanes of traffic. It represents finding a different way to do this that will accommodate for now the fact there are lots of people who are still driving cars and trucks and transit vehicles.
So for the people that are watching, or at least watching through their computers, this council meeting today, the proposal that the councillor seems to want to ram through is a lane down the middle of the road for bicycles and larger sidewalks that would take over some more road. So where are all those cars going to go if this councillor gets his way?
Well, we've heard various answers through you, Madam Speaker, that suggest that there actually are going to be provisions made. It's ironic, because if this claim that is made that people aren't going to drive their cars anymore or they'll go away, why then do we need to expand Beecroft and Doris, which also will call into question what I think otherwise would be a safer cycling option for those people with dedicated bike lanes. But I don't know the answer to that question, and I guess in the absence of not being sure about that, in light of the fact that people still do drive cars and trucks to do business, and that there are lots of transit vehicles, as we've heard, I just wasn't prepared in that balancing thing that I have to sort of focus myself on to take away the lanes of traffic.
What happens in these scenarios is very clear, in my opinion. Having been around here for 28 years, when you start narrowing roads, people do get frustrated, and they will use the side roads. And that's exactly what's going to happen in this particular community if this councillor, Councillor Fillion, gets his way.
Please.
Would you agree with me?
Well, I can certainly only say that that I think in some respects the cars some of them might go somewhere else. We have a problem right now with transit capacity on that particular line that we're trying to address through projects that we have, but until those kinds of things are complete, I suspect the same number of people are going to be trying to get to where they're going in a car because they don't have a choice, and therefore they have to go somewhere, and the alternative will be to go to one of the other streets Councillor Shiner was asking about, or to go to the side streets, and I guess the second one is worse than the first, but they all go somewhere else.
Our discussion has been very healthy right now, Mr. Mayor. I'd like you to reverse King Street, and then you and I will have a really good relationship.
Okay,
I guess that I'll take that as a question mark at the end of it, Madam Speaker, only because I would like to say to the member this, which is that when I've had to take a bold step and support a bold step being recommended in this chamber, like King Street, or like Bloor Street, I've been prepared to do so when I think the answers are gathered together, when I think we've done our homework, when I think that it makes sense overall, and when perhaps there aren't other better options available. And I have been prepared to stand up and support those with my colleagues. On this one, I feel the option that I'm supporting is better in the context of being a balanced approach to address the concerns of all of the different people, cyclists, pedestrians, drivers, transit vehicles, whoever I've forgotten, I apologize. But I think that's what I'm doing, and that's why I'm doing it.
Thank you. I thought for sure Councillor Mammoliti was going to give the mayor a hug there. Councillor Perruzza.
I have no issues with giving anybody a hug.
Yeah, so thank you, Speaker. I got a couple of questions I want to go through a little later, but I just want to pick up on a point that the mayor made. So you were up there last weekend for an event, and you drove down Yonge Street, and traffic was very bad, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So you believe that when after you do this work, whatever option you choose, that drive would be better?
I'm not, you actually misunderstand me through you, Madam Speaker. I'm not necessarily arguing that the work that will be done that will leave 6 lanes where there were 6 lanes presently will make the traffic better. I am arguing that in order to achieve what we're trying to get, which is better public realm, better, safer cycling lanes and so on, we don't have to do something that is proposed here by the option I don't support, which is taking the lanes of traffic from 6 to 4, because I do believe that would make traffic worse. Okay. And my objective coming into office, and what I said I was going to try to do on behalf of those people who still drive cars pending our construction of public transit, which we're doing aggressively, was not to make traffic worse, and if anything, to try and make it better.
Okay. So if I'm to understand that, I guess what you're saying is whether you leave 6, reduce it to 4, make any changes whatsoever, traffic isn't necessarily going to get better than what you experienced last Sunday.
I think some of the other steps we're taking through you, Madam Speaker, with this having been identified as one of the 10 worst intersections, literally, and to the north, in the whole city. We are taking steps. We have taken steps with signal timing and other things to try and make it better. So I'm optimistic we can make it better, but I sure know that the way it's not going to get better is to take the number of active lanes of traffic from 6 to 4. So I certainly know that.
But you would agree that extending the construction schedule there from 2 to 4, potentially 6 years, stretching out sort of all the congestion and the gridlock created by construction, that's actually going to make it worse for a much longer period of time than making it better, better than the experience that you had last Sunday there. Because I traveled this stretch of street quite a bit. I've driven there, I've ridden my bike there, I've taken my motorcycle there, I've walked it. It doesn't matter what time of the day. Councillor Mammoliti is right on that point. It's terrible right now.
Well, Madam Speaker, if I understand the import of your question, I will concede the fact that when you do construction of any kind, whether you're going from 4 to 6, 6 to 4, or 3 to 9, the bottom line is that construction is disruptive. But you have to sort of accept the fact that we don't have the option of doing nothing, at least not for much longer, because the road needs to be reconstructed. And just like the Eglinton Transit, which is causing terrible disruption for people and businesses along Eglinton, hopefully the reward will be worth what we've gone through in terms of having a new piece of transit. And in this case, we have to rebuild the road, and that's why we're having this discussion. We don't, I mean, the urgency is not there, save and except for some people's timetables. Yeah. But we, just let me finish, if you would, that we have to reconstruct the road. So there will be some pain involved in that, as there is in any of our civic construction projects that we undertake.
So the question that I wanted to ask before I got distracted by that comment that somehow sort of conjured this image in my brain about things getting better on Yonge Street. The question that I did want to ask you is this, is that the option that you are now advocating, I think it's called Enhance Yonge and Beecroft plus Beecroft, costs $20 million more than just the Yonge Street option, whatever they call transform. So Yonge Street is $51 million. Enhance Yonge, the one you're supporting, plus Beecroft is $71 million. So one is $51 million, one is $71 million. And for the benefits you're advocating, you think it's worth spending that much money more?
Well, first of all, Madam Speaker, I would point out that our officials indicated today, and this is incomplete work, that even that number you cited has come dramatically down since it was first discussed, from the 22 million or whatever number you said, down quite a bit lower than that. I'm optimistic we can get it lower still. But if you looked at the big picture, which is what we're supposed to do here, and said, well, what about the damage to the economy of lost productivity from traffic, which we talk about all the time, and nobody disputes that. What about the damage to the environment of increased traffic jams that are going on? What about the lost family time that people will have if the traffic is made worse? I think a lot of people would say, you know, that maybe a little bit of a premium you might pay to have what I believe will be even safer bike lanes on Beecroft. They might say that they'd be willing to undertake that. But I view the numbers that you've stated, at least in the case of the Beecroft option, as being far from final, and our own staff confirmed that. That's a work in progress, and we're going to try and work that number down if that's approved as much as we can.
Please stop interrupting and allow the mayor to answer.
You understand that even the fuddle-duddle that's being created around it suggests that it's anywhere from $7 to $20 million more, and that's in today's dollars. That's not suggesting when we actually get out there to do the work and discover that it's probably double the number right across the board, right?
Thank you, Councillor
Madam Speaker, if that's true, following the logic of the member, then I guess the price tag of option A, you know, the transform Yonge Street, is also going to be double. So inflation will do what inflation does. But at the end of the day, I'm optimistic that the numbers in respect of option B, the Beecroft transform Yonge option put together, can be brought down, that we can do it in a prudent way, we can do it in a way that is safe and that produces at the same time, I believe, as good and safer a bike option, a better option for transit vehicles and traffic, a good option for public realm improvement, and a safer option for pedestrians. And I believe that will be accomplished with the budget. I would point out again, one last comment in answer to this question, that I believe I'm correct in saying, aside from some money that's available from the federal government, that there's no money in the budget for this entire project, or very little. So, I mean, before we start worrying about the amount, we should be worrying about how we're going to put this into the budget, if it is approved, on either basis, frankly.
Thank you. We'll recess to 2 o'clock, and we'll continue with the questions.